and good evening. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melindo, welcoming you back for a long in the making stream topic that was actually part of a stream goal that we reached maybe a couple months ago. But we had stream goal, which was, there was all these amazing campaign settings that TSR, Wizards of the Coast, have put out for the Dungeons and Dragons game. And, nowadays, especially with 5th edition, unless I'm grossly mistaken, you basically had Forgotten Realms. And I know that they released a Dragonlance book and whatever. But, by and large, most people are probably just familiar with Forgotten Realms and, or maybe, whatever Critical Role's world is. But back in the day, there were a lot of campaign settings, particularly during the era of AD&D 2nd edition, the TSR era of the 90s, when settings just seemed to flow out from the people at TSR at a rate. And actually, interestingly, in some books and research that has been done, a lot of people felt like or have sort of said in hindsight that actually creating all of these different campaign settings was actually problematic to the business and to the brand. And part of the reason for that was, if I release a Forgotten Realms campaign setting and you go and pick it up and you start a game in the Forgotten Realms, then when I produce a Forgotten Realms book or supplement, maybe you'll check it out. Hey, Mr. Damien Williams with their membership chat. Thank you so much for that. Literally none of my favorite campaign settings made the top 5, and 2 of my least liked did. Yeah, so what Damien is referring to is we had a big poll as part of our Patreon, of course, for people to vote on what campaign setting we were going to cover first. I don't exactly, actually, you know what? Let me pull it up. Let me see how far back it was. But I'm curious. I don't actually even remember what the top 5 were. So let me scroll up here, see if I can find it here. All right, here we go. I found it. Let me just share this, I guess, real quick. Birthright today. But number 2 was Eberron. Number 3, Planescape. Number 4 tied. Actually, we had like a 3-way tie for 4th. We had Mystara, Forgotten Realms, and Dark Sun. And then below that, we had Greyhawk, Al-Qadim, Dragonlance, Kara-Tur, Ravenloft, Lankmar, Spelljammer, Hollow World, and Red Steel. And we didn't even get to all of them because some of them didn't even make the list. But there were a lot of them. And as a result, I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of them, but hey, it is what it is. But anyways, thank you, Damien. Damien, I'm curious, what were your favorites? I'm curious. But thank you. So any case, so Birthright won. And so a lot of people have said that all of these campaign settings actually led to the kind of demise of TSR. And as a result, and the reason is because if I'm playing in Forgotten Realms and a Dark Sun book comes out and a Dragonlance book comes out and a Ravenloft book comes out and a Greyhawk book comes out and you name it, I'm not going to buy that book, right? So when you start creating 1, 2, 5, 10 different campaign settings, and suddenly you're segmenting your groups, not to mention all of the people back then, this was much more in vogue. I don't know how, actually, I don't really have any sense for how often people do this, but what was really in vogue back then was still creating your own campaign. So to a certain extent, when a, Dark Sun book came out and you're playing in your own home campaign, then you're not going to buy that either. So you end up sort of splitting, your base into a lot of things, and you end up producing a lot of books that people don't use. And so I think that my sense is that the 2 big companies, Paizo and Wizards of the Coast, have sort of taken a different tact for that. So what I think Wizards of the Coast has done primarily is create very generic adventures and set everything in the Forgotten Realms, which, to be clear, has a lot of, it's the generic fantasy setting. It's pretty generic. Paizo took a different approach where they basically said, hey, we're going to put all of those different campaign settings, Dark Sun, Ravenloft, Birthright. We're going to put all of those into the same campaign world. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It's not a different campaign. It's all just Golarion. And obviously it's not, which is why we call Golarion a kitchen sink setting, because they kind of just threw all of those different campaign settings into one. And it works. People might pick up a Lost Omens book for Paizo that they might not have otherwise picked up. So, in any case, let's see, what did Damien like? Callimachus, Council of Worms would be near the top for my list. I own that box set, and it is awesome. Josh, that's great. I'm glad you were able to catch the beginning of the stream. Okay, you hate Forgotten Realms. You dislike Eberron. And what you like is Ravenloft and Dark Sun. All right, a little edgy there. Beowulf also hates Eberron. And Cal is asking the right question. What's wrong with Eberron? I love Eberron. I have an extensive collection of Eberron 3rd edition books because I think Eberron was sweet. I love this campaign setting. I love this world. I love some of the ideas in it. It's excellent. They even brought it back for 4th edition. KC runs all F20 in Eberron. I hate Magic being common and mundane. It's boring, and I'm not a fan of steampunk funk stuff. But see, here's the thing. All right, we're already getting off topic. By the way, if you want to throw some support and love, you guys were very, very supportive and thankful on Tuesday, so I understand that. But we're probably in for a long one tonight. We'll see. So I don't feel as compelled to not go off onto tangents. The thing is, in your standard D&D game, Magic is common and Magic is mundane, right? That's the truth. You might pretend that it's not, but it is. And so Eberron just takes this idea of taking D&D the way it is instead of the way it pretends to be, and then says, okay, so what would logically happen? I argue that Eberron is the most simulationist imagination of a campaign setting that is based off of a core D20, F20 system framework. Because to me, it is the natural evolution of a world, of a society where magic is essentially free, plentiful, and readily available. And, the whole, any sufficient technology could be replaced by magic. Well, any sufficiently advanced magic can replace technology. And I do think there's a certain idea that magic would, in some ways, stymie the development of technology, because why go develop something in technology when you can just, enchant some Kyber crystals or some Eberron crystals so that you can go, build a train or an airship or anything of that nature. And the idea that people would have magical marks that would, give them these magical abilities, that they would create guilds and commerce out of it. There was an NPC class in Eberron, not designed for PCs to be used, but this was the 3rd edition era, called the Mage Right. And it was the idea of sort of like a blue collar wizard that used magic in order to, get their jobs done. Beautiful. I love it. And a great example of this is if you watch, and I know a lot of people actually don't like it, so maybe there is something to be said about this. But if you watch Legend of Korra, in Legend of Korra, you see that, it's not like most D&D campaigns where it's like 3,000 years have passed and absolutely nothing has changed. People are still riding horses. They're still wearing chainmail. Nothing has changed. But if you look at Avatar and you look at the difference between The Last Airbender and 20, 30 years later, Legend of Korra, now benders are like using their bending to like do sports. They're using their bending to like power factories and cities. It's an evolution of the magic, which, you know, bending is basically magic. And I'm a big fan. I think it's cool. Now, if you want to take a step back and say, I don't want that in my game, that's fine. But then you actually need to go into the game, into the mechanics, into the simulation, and turn that magic dial way, way, way down. And then explain to me why, you know, your campaign world has been around for 3,000 years and everybody is still stuck in the Middle Ages. It doesn't make sense. Yes, it's definitely not steampunk. It's magic punk. Magic punk isn't even the right word, right? It's magic pulp is probably the best place. Yeah, anyways, lots of people in chat here. So what I was saying is we might be here for a while tonight. So if you want to show your love and support, make sure to drop a super chat or a tip. Also, we're going to be diving into PDFs tonight. That tends to mean that I tend to be looking here at my PDF screen instead of here at my chat. So it's possible that I may miss your comment or your question. But if you super chat or tip, obviously I get an audio alert, and that makes it easier for me to call out your question, stop, and make sure it get answered. So yeah. Anyways, I want to say hello to everybody here. Sorry if I missed you in chat. I see Satir, Sims3, Kalamakis, KC, Beowulf, of course. Rule of Cool is here. Solana is in the house. Cal, Damien, of course. Jay is here. Never saw the poll. Damn shame. Lord Dragon is here. Hello, Lord Dragon. Locanor, Mike T is here. Awesome to see you, Mike. Mind Blown. Hello, hello. Hi, hi, hi. Yes, we do have a backlog of passable streams, but you know, there's always more to talk about. This hobby is as deep as the ocean. There's so much to talk about. Let's see if we missed anybody else. Oh, okay. The other Kyle is here. Hey, what's up? Loves Eberron. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yeah, Ken, I have my favorites. That doesn't mean do I dislike a setting. I probably dislike the Ravenloft setting, to be honest with you. I think Ravenloft is really cool as a castle, you know, as a module, I6. But they were very clearly, in my personal opinion, trying to go after the gothic vampire crowd, right? Because Vampire the Masquerade had come out like 92, 93, and it was the big new hip thing. And they were like, well, we've got Strahd, right? So let's make Ravenloft, and let's make the Domains of Dread. Let's kind of get into that sort of goth vampire edginess. Everybody who grew up in the 90s, as I did, knows that vampires were just in vogue all over the place. You know, Interview with the Vampire and Underworld and Blade and all these other games, or all these other movies. So I think that they were just trying to tap into that. No. Ravenloft came out before Vampire the Masquerade. The module, okay? The module Ravenloft came out I6. I'm talking about the campaign setting Ravenloft. See, Cal says, I don't look at the polls, but my vote is for free market. Even when it's not on the poll, free market mega campaign win. I will say this. I thought for sure that there would never be a chance that there would be a PDF of this available. When you pointed out to me that there is a PDF of this available, which I have not bought, but you know, it could happen. It will happen. It will happen. And we'll have to make we'll have to carve out like an 8-hour slot to cover this entirety of this game. Thank you, Cal. We're either dredging the depths of the Mariana Trench, or we are the oh god, what was it called? The deep explorer, the thing that, you know, imploded and killed all those people. That's either us. Jay says second edition Ravenloft campaign setting was 1990. Vampire the Masquerade first edition was 1991. Okay. Well, there you go. They were I got it wrong. I got it backwards. By the way, Jay, I'm gonna try to demonstrate my nerd cred here. Is your avatar the 4th edition Beholder? And if it is it the mini, or is it the life-sized 4th edition Beholder that was at Gen Con 2008? Let me know, Jay. Let me know. I'm just curious. It looks like it is, but I could be wrong. Let's see. When was Council of Worms? I'm not exactly sure. Let's see. Council of Worms was released 1994. So, Nakia, I have to say, gonna have to catch the VOD. Just dropping in. Well, good to see you, and glad to see you. Happy to have you here. Thank you again for. Been excited to see you on the Patreon and the Discord. It's been very, very awesome. Yes, the Titan from Ocean Gate. That's the one I was thinking of. But thank you, Nakia, for chiming in. Hope you enjoy this stream. It was the Beholder at Gen Con 2000. Are you sure it was Gen Con 2000? Because that looks like the 4th edition Beholder, like a lot. Here, hold on a sec. All right, does everybody see Jay's? I could be, maybe I'm crazy here. Let me see. Hold on a sec. Let me see. Album. No, that's 2009. 2006, maybe? Maybe it was 2009. I don't know where all my photos are. What year did I go to Gen Con? 2007. Maybe it's that year. All of my photos basically on my photo album are just from Gen Con. All right. Well, I can't find it, but I thought for sure I had that photo. Damn. Now I'm like actually trying to figure out where the fuck this thing is. I'm sorry, this is really boring. Apparently I just deleted that all. Okay. Cool beans. All right. Anyways, there's a great picture of Smith fighting that Beholder. All right. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we are going to be talking about Birthright. All right, so Birthright campaign setting. Now, this was primarily written by Rich Baker, and this was a box set. This came out as a box set back when box sets were really, really cool, and you just got a ton of unbelievable value. And our Birthright campaign setting, and what we're going to do is we'll kind of break this down in stages. But the Birthright campaign setting box set, okay, came with 3 books, 3 booklets, right? They're basically usually staple bound, soft cover. We get an atlas of Cerilia, and Cerilia is the principal continent on which all of the Birthright action takes place. The actual name of the world is like Abyssiniathor or something like that, but nobody really knows about that. The continent that everything takes place on is called Cerilia. It's like Forgotten Realms. People think Forgotten Realms. No, Forgotten Realms is actually an entire world called Torel. But the most of everything that everybody knows about Forgotten Realms is actually on the continent of Faerun. Anyways, so we get one book on an atlas that covers the kind of history of the world and some of its locations. Then we get book 2, which is the meat of the stuff, where we're going to probably be spending the most time, which is the rule book, right? Which is the rules for how to play this campaign setting. And they are deep. This is a deep change. Now, I should note, again, if you look up at the top of the screen, this is for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. So this campaign setting uses AD&D 2nd edition. So there may be some concepts and terms which I'm very familiar with, but maybe some of you aren't. So if we need to, we'll take some time, we'll explain them, and we'll go through them. The 3rd book is called Ruins of Empire. And this is more of a GM book, and it has some more detailed information about some of the things that are going on, some of the movers and shakers. What are some of the big kingdoms and NPCs doing? Advice for adventures, along with some, kind of hidden information about some of the more, quote, bad guys in the setting book. So you've got 3 books that come in the setting. You've got the Atlas. Okay, this is our Atlas of Cerilia. And for whatever reason, the PDF scans are really, really dark. You've got the rule book. Here's the rule book. And again, we can see the art here is this kind of a very, very Pendragon-esque art, I will fully admit. We can see here, by the way, that it was written by Rich Baker and Colin McComb. Rich Baker, of course, a legendary person. And I will shout out proofreading by Sue Weinlein, who I really like. Yeah, we've got some art by Eastleigh and O'Connor. The poster maps were by Diesel. So this is sort of a who's who of TSR at the time. And then our third book in the box set is The Ruins of Empire, which is so dark that we basically can't make out what's happening here, but it looks like it's more people with swords and some sort of siege. Now, of course, it would not be a TSR era product, okay, unless it came with a bunch of other shit too. And believe me, it did. For starters, it came with its own DM screen. That's right. It came with a DM screen. So here, this thing actually has good scans, so we can actually get a better look at the art now. So we can see here, it's kind of got this, again, very strong medieval, Pendragon vibe to it. It's kind of got this, again, it almost has this kind of medieval tapestry-like art quality to it without being too overt about it. So here, this is more art from the DM screen. There we go. Look at that. Pretty cool. And then, yeah, so it came with its own DM screen. Some of this information was basic stuff that you would find on the AD&D 2nd edition Dungeon Master screen. Things like the Turning Undead table, the surprise modifiers, the encounter reactions. God, AD&D was so good. Encounter distance, which they kept in 3rd edition, but they dropped in 4th and 5th. Punching and wrestling results. Who remembers those? Grenade-like missiles, saving throws, of course. And, of course, if you don't want to look them up here, you can find them on page 101 of your player's handbook. Modifiers to initiative, THACOs, item saving throws, morale ratings. But now we get into some preview of some of the Birthright stuff. We get the domain turn sequence of play. All right. We get classes and regency, province taxation, guild and temple collections, domain turn random events, domain maintenance costs, response to random events, court costs, and then the master list of actions. All right. So all of these things here on the page 3 and 4 of the GM screen, of the DM screen, are getting to this idea of birthrights and sort of a hint of what we're in for here. And again, we'll definitely touch on this. But Birthright is a game that takes a simple premise, which is in AD&D, 1st edition and 2nd edition, once your character reached a certain level, usually level 9, which was sometimes called name level, your character would essentially become a lord or a lady. And you would gain a keep or a temple, and you would gain followers. And there was this expectation that was built into the game that the game would substantially change at these levels. That you would go from sort of being, a wandering vagabond, a hedge knight, right? An adventurer, a ne'er-do-well, a scoundrel. And as you gain wealth and power, you would naturally become not just a strong adventurer, but you would become a strong political force. Your wealth, your influence could shape the fate of worlds, of nations, right? And so your character kind of became more of a political figure. And there was this based idea in AD&D 2nd edition that the latter half of the game was supposed to be more of this like political war game. Now, the truth is, I don't know how many people actually really played that way. I think a lot of people, and I think the modern game design sort of reflect that, which is that a lot of people go, no, I just want to keep fighting monsters in dungeons or dungeon-like things, right? And just go from there. Now, there's also a big problem. Again, we're going off on a rant here, but that's okay. Let me pause this really quick. Let me go back here. So the thing is, you have to remember that back in the day, and ironically, this probably holds true to a certain extent in 5th edition, but in 1st edition AD&D and 2nd edition AD&D, your characters didn't have that many hit points. It was harder to get these high constitution scores. The HP adjustments weren't as high. And sure, fighters got D10 in AD&D. But after 9th level or so, characters stopped rolling hit dice. So, and you rolled every level. So let's assume our character is a 9th level fighter. They have 9d10 hit points. All right. So on average, our character is going to have somewhere between 40 to 50 hit points. That's it. 40 to 50 hit points, plus maybe 10 points from con. So our character has 60 hit points at level 9. Yeah, but what about level 10 and 11, 12? No, you don't roll it. You just gain 3. So our character is at 60, let's say 55. They're going to go to 58, 61, 64, 66. They might be lucky if they get to 70 or 75 hit points. You just didn't have that many hit points. And there was no level-based modifiers in things like your armor class. So once you put on full plate and had a shield, aside from magic, which was not this kind of common marketplace, then your character was very fragile and very vulnerable. And what this meant is that if your character wanted to fight armies, you needed armies, right? A modern day D&D character, if they're level, if you're playing Pathfinder 2nd edition and your character's level 17, or if you're playing D&D 4th edition, you could go fight hundreds, maybe thousands of low-level, troops and be totally fine. And so I actually say that with the quote-unquote flat math, that 5th edition D&D in some ways actually could probably reflect some of this. But the idea was that's why you built up these armies and these castles and these keeps. It's because you wanted to have, political power, and you wanted to have the ability to sort of shape the world. And you couldn't do that because your character never got that strong. Probably the only character class that could get to the point where they could really just destroy armies by themselves was the wizard. And that's because the wizard spell list went all the way up to 9th level. But, D4 hit points, probably it was a slog to get there. This was their reward after a lifetime, a campaign time of pain and suffering. So anyways, so what this campaign setting was trying to do is take this idea of, okay, what about if we took that domain play and instead of starting it off at, instead of waiting until 9th level, what if we put it right in the beginning, right at the front and center of the campaign? What if our characters were rulers right from the beginning of the campaign? Okay. And so the idea then was that this domain level play took place right in the beginning of the game. So we have, as I was saying before, we had our DM screen. Okay. But we also get the battle mat, which we'll come back to, because this game had its own form of armies. Okay, your characters, it came with all of these cardboard cards that had different troops, almost like you were playing a game of Warhammer. Okay, or I guess Warhammer would be the best. Warhammer or Kings of War. And the idea was that you would take these cards and your character would acquire these units, and you would play out like a combat skirmish game. Now, it was a simplified version of the game, but there was a ton of these different cards, okay? And there was terrain cards that you could put onto the battlefield to represent terrains, okay? So you just had all these different, I've got 2 units of dwarf guards and a unit of dwarf crossbowman, right? And they had very simple rules, but it was designed to make it quick and easy to go through, okay? And of course, it also wouldn't be a box set without poster maps. Now, of course, this is on PDF, so we're going to have to settle for it. But this poster map is kind of a cut up version of the main continent of Cerilia. Okay, so we can see here, this is sort of the main continent of Cerilia. We can see here the south coast. And these are all these different sort of kingdoms that are sort of divided up politically. But there's also a second poster map, okay, which is a zoomed in version of just this southern coast region, okay, which is a kingdom or a region that is called Onweir. And so here is a zoomed in version of that same south coast, okay, of Onweir. And we can see that this game starts to look a lot like a game of diplomacy or a game of Risk, all right? We've got all of these different, provinces. They have numbers, they have values. There are capital cities, there's political dividing lines. And there is basically a sort of a strategic war game element to this campaign that exists simultaneously with your character being an adventurer, which is pretty interesting. Okay. And by the way, since we're looking at this map, the numbers that are on each of these different provinces represent two things. The first number represents its province score, which is basically how civilized is it? How advanced is it? So something like a 2 is a fairly, primitive, maybe just scatterings of farms, maybe just a couple of villages, right? Whereas something like over here on the left, we have Onweir, right? Which and it has the province of Onweir in the region of Onweir with the city of Onweir, and we can see that this has a 7 because this is basically the height of civilization. Now the number after the slash is basically how magically potent this land is. Obviously, this game this came out in 1990. Let's see. I think it was released in 95. 1995 is when this was released. And I would be lying if I said that this game, they weren't taking inspiration from all over the place. And we're going to get to that after we go through the box stat stuff. And you can keep an eye out for them as we go through it. But the basic idea here is that the land itself provides you with magical energy. Okay. Try to think of another game that was very popular, say 1993, 1994, where the magic came from, say the forests and the coasts and the plains and the swamps and the hills and the mountains. And you will definitely get a sense here. And so one of the things that you'll notice is that the more primitive or the more remote a province is, the higher the second number is. And the second number is that province's magical source potential. So, for example, the capital of Onweir, the province, actually is too civilized. It has been too domesticated. There is no magic to be gleaned from Onweir. But if we look here, same thing here with the province of Ilion, which is just a single province, little region or kingdom. It's a very civilized thing. Look, we've got 2 big cities, including the capital city. It's a 7-0. So very, very strong province. Lots of people, lots of taxation potential, but no magical potential. But now look at some of these. Look at the Shadow Green or the West March, right? The province value here is 1. You might just have a couple of, crazy kooks living in the forest, but the magical potential here is very high. So there's a lot of moving pieces, to say the least. But we do get these really cool poster maps. And then on the right side of the poster map is a calendar so that you can track time, because time is how you do your domain turns. So it's got its own calendar system for you to track what's happening. Okay. And the idea was that, you would sort of, go through these things. So that's what comes in the box set. 3 books. We'll cover the Atlas. We'll cover the rule book, and we probably won't cover the 3rd book, which is the Ruins of Empire, because that's getting more into like how do you build adventures and how do you actually play this campaign. And we might talk a little bit about the war system, but I think by and large, we'll try to cover the sort of the gist. Now, real quick. So before we get into this, I just want to say, in reading through this and sort of now this is not a campaign setting I ever owned, nor is it a campaign setting that I ever played in. Now, my good friend, Mike Babooter, who I grew up playing games with, he always seemed to have the campaign setting box sets that I didn't have, right? So I had Planescape, and I had, Council of Worms, and I had Forgotten Realms. He had Lankmar, he had Birthright. And he was much more into politics, even as young kids. We were in our teens, than I was. He was much more into sort of scoundrelly characters. At the time, I thought it was very disgusting, but now I'm like, oh, he was kind of ahead of the curve. So he had this box set, and I had read it. I had flipped through it at his house and stuff like that. We talked about starting a campaign in it, but it never materialized because we got into high school, and people were going to parties and doing all the other stuff that you do in high school. And so, whereas I was still playing D&D. And so, he really kind of stopped playing D&D, and it never materialized. But, and then by the time that I would have maybe been potentially set up to run it or been interested in it, third edition had come out, and, the whole world was turned upside down. So there's a couple of things though that I think really tie in, that are really touch points into this. The first is, this is obviously inspired by Tolkien. There's a lot of elements here of sort of geopolitics of the bad guys and the good guys, and sort of nation states coming together and sort of, having to do that sort of politics. At the same time, there's also strong elements here of wargaming and sort of games like diplomacy. Secondly, going back to the Tolkien thing as well, we are going to see, if you are familiar with the legendarium of Tolkien, that your characters, these kind of divinely blooded characters who have magical traits in their blood, is very, very similar to the idea of Númenóreans, okay, or the Dunedain, as they are called in the later ages. And the idea is that these are characters, or these are people who literally sort of have a divine spark that is passed on through their bloodline that gives them, right, long life. And, if you're not super familiar with it, or you've never read the books, like Aragorn is able to heal people, right, with the laying of his hands. That is because he is the true king. That is because he is a Númenórean. Aragorn is 90 or something, or 87. He's very old. He has long life, and he's not immortal like an elf. But the idea is that his bloodline, which goes back to ancient Númenor, is sort of this divinely inspired bloodline. That idea is very prominent in this. Third thing is, in my personal opinion, there is a strong element here of you could either say Vampire the Masquerade, and I might get the word wrong. So if you're in the chat and you're a vampire person, get me right. There's a strong element here of Vampire the Masquerade and Diablerie, okay? Which is in Vampire the Masquerade. Again, I never played Vampire the Masquerade. I only know this because, it's Vampire, and I've been playing these games for a long time. Diablerie is where you drink the blood of a more powerful vampire, and you become more powerful. But if you're not familiar with that, maybe you're familiar with Highlander, okay? And in Highlander, of course, you have these Highlanders who have these genetic powers, and if you cut off your opponent's head, all right, you get their power. Well, guess what? This game basically has that, okay? Which is, if you are a divinely inspired character, which is called a scion, or sometimes called the blooded, if you kill another scion, another blooded, okay, someone who has this lineage of divine spark, and you kill them with a thrust through the heart, then you basically get their power, okay? And so it's very inspired to me. It's very inspired by maybe Vampire the Masquerade, but maybe maybe Highlander, Hey, alternate game master, thank you for the super chat coming all the way from New Zealand. Just want to thank you for the value bombs you drop in for someone who missed RPGs when I was a kid. I would have loved all of this in the 90s. Yeah, it was there was a lot of stuff. But the great part about it, alternate game master, is nowadays we have PDFs. And some of these box sets are insanely expensive. I was looking at some of the box sets I own, but if you go out to eBay, it's like, oh my God. But you can buy this PDF for $8 or something off of Drive-Thru RPG. So there is something to be said about that. But thank you for your first super chat, and I'm glad you're enjoying this and getting the value. So yeah, so there's this kind of Highlander aspect. And then lastly, Magic the Gathering. There is an idea that the wizards of this world, basically, if you're familiar with the old lore of Magic the Gathering, your player, you are supposed to be a planeswalker. Before they were stupid cards, and before like you were playing them as a summon, the idea was that you were a planeswalker and your opponent was a planeswalker, and you were battling or dueling over control of these spells and land sources, which was called mana in Magic the Gathering. And the idea was that these planeswalkers would travel through the multiverse and they would forge these connections to these beautiful places of powerful, natural, magical energy. The islands and the oceans, the mountains and the hills, the forests. And that was your green mana and your red mana and all this other stuff. Okay. And so, you're ever in search of these sort of magical sources of energy. This is very much a part of this game as well. Now, it may not matter if you're not a wizard, but it is sort of part of the lore of this game. All right. So let's get into the Atlas. Just now, this is fairly quick, so we're not going to go through all of this. It's originally written. There's like an introduction from Rich Baker, and from his co-author Colin McComb. Okay, and you can see here that he basically wanted to write his next big fantasy novel. He was going to call it Kingslayer, and this kind of the novel never materialized, but his ideas of what he wanted to do kind of came forth into this. Now, this is written originally as sort of a letter or a diary entry from a member of this elite group. But needless to say, we're going to kind of cut through here. You had this, and we'll start here, the tribes. So you had this continent of Cerilia, and the elves lived there, and as did some of the other races. And sure enough, humans showed up. Okay, and the humans came in and they brought with them their pantheon of gods, and the elves weren't too happy about this. And the humans kind of disrupted what the elves and the dwarves were going for. If you're familiar with the Forbidden Lands, this actually sounds very similar to the Ravenlands. And so the tribes of these people that came to this land, kind of broke up into these different factions of groups that supported different gods and goddesses. And eventually, the seventh god, the dark god, came up and sort of followed and pursued them and began corrupting some of the tribes of humans to their service. And the elves, who were so tired of the humans, joined forces, if you will, with the shadow. So think like the children of the forest from Game of Thrones. So the elves kind of threw their lot in with Team Evil, all right? And finally, the dark god Azrai came, and basically you had, cataclysmic, ending war, all right? And everybody was getting annihilated and wiped out, and you had the War of the Shadow, and, there's all sorts of stuff happening. And what ends up happening is there's a final cataclysmic clash on the slopes of this mountain called Mount Desimar, or Dismar, and everybody's there, okay? And what ends up happening is the gods themselves, the gods of the humans, come down onto the battlefield as avatars in physical form to do battle with basically Sauron, okay? Like the evil god, Azrai, he's basically Sauron. Think of that scene, right? Where Sauron's on the battlefield from the very beginning of Lord of the Rings, and he's in his physical form. Now, imagine instead, right? And instead of on the slopes of Mount Doom, Lord Dragon, we're on the slopes of Mount Dismar. It's very, very similar. But instead of having Gil-galad and Elrond and Isildur, and what was Isildur's father's name? Why can't I think of Isildur's father's name? Elendil. Instead of having Elendil and Isildur, imagine if there was like the literal avatars of the gods of humanity, and they came down, like the Valar, came down to fight Sauron 1v1. Well, what ends up happening is the gods basically sacrifice themselves to destroy Azrai and his army. And they basically blow up. Okay, and all the old gods perish, and the evil god is destroyed, allegedly. And you basically, again, just like the beginning of Lord of the Rings, the ring gets chopped off, the guy kind of and blows up, except that's all the gods blowing up. Now, obviously, a ton of people die from this. But what ends up happening is this divine energy shoots out, and the people who do survive, some of them, the people who were basically the highest level followers of those gods, some of them absorbed so much divine essence that they immediately became a new pantheon of gods. But there was a ton of other people who survived, and the divine energy basically got into their bodies and became a part of their DNA, of their soul, of their bloodline. And what they found is that they had this powerful ability now related to this divine strength. And of course, it depends on which god that you got it from. Okay, there was like the 6 gods that were battling. So there's sort of 6 lines of descending. Technically, there's a 7th, right? The dark god, but we don't talk about that one. And these people, essentially, these survivors of the battle, would basically go on to found these great, powerful, noble houses, because not only did they find that having this bloodline ability, this blooded power, gave them magical abilities that set them above everybody else. They also discovered, and perhaps it was because or tied to the fact that, the gods themselves, right? The gods themselves were powerful, but that's only because they drew strength from their worshipers. They drew strength from the people itself. Well, what these newly enriched, empowered, enhanced people discovered is that they could draw strength from the land and from the people, okay? And the stronger and healthier and more vibrant their kingdoms were, the more powerful they got, okay? It's almost like they were nurturing that divine spark. And a successful, powerful ruler could actually sort of level up, if you will, the divine power within their bloodline and actually cause it to become stronger through being a good ruler or through being a strong ruler. And so this kind of set the stage for this world where you have this small percentage of people who literally carry this divine bloodline that traces its way all the way back to this cataclysmic event on the slopes of Mount Dismar. Okay? So things blow up, new gods are formed. Of course, there's also, the evil god blows up or is killed. So of course that forms, threats and evils, the abominations. It's not all just sunshines and rainbows. Okay. And, then there's some conflict and war, and then there's this big empire, and then the empire shatters. This is very similar to Eberron. If you're familiar with Eberron, you had, the kingdom of, Galifar. Is that right? No, maybe it was the kingdom of Galifar. And it broke up in this big civil war, right? And the different sub kingdoms all battled for each other, it kind of sets the stage for the current situation, because you don't want to have a situation where it's like everything's united under one powerful ruler. Nope. It blows up, and and now there's continuous civil wars rack on weir for more than 70 years, right? So this is kind of a world where things have been pretty rough and tied up. Yes, I feel like there used to be a big empire, but it broke up is pretty much every F20 campaign ever. That's fairly accurate. And thank you, Casey. Galifar. All right, I got it right. I think one of the reasons I like Birthright is its history is such a big deal in the present, so different than other generic fantasy settings. Yeah, I can see that. Now, we're not going to go too much into detail about this, but one of the things that's kind of interesting in this game is you have your elves and you have your dwarves, but they are a little different. And the humans themselves are actually divided into kind of 5 separate races, but they're really cultures. You know, nowadays with more modern gaming tech, right, we would say that their ancestry is human, but their heritage is, you know, Anurian or Brecht or the Rajuric, the Kinasi, or the Vos, okay? But back in the time, in 1995, the idea that you could have like different humans, and they actually had like different stat lines, was like really, really, really crazy. And so you basically have these five groups of people, who kind of trace their lineage back to those original tribes that came to Cerilia. And they are kind of different. Now, to be fair, you know, they're kind of, they're kind of inspired by modern day, tropes that we might otherwise, easily identify. And so like I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, so like the Anurians are like noble and ambitious, and they're sort of known for being politically and militarily, savvy, lots of chivalry, lots of knights. These are very much like, kind of like medieval England, medieval France inspired. The Brecks are seafaring traders who ply their ships all across the world. And there's sort of an element there of maybe of, sort of Venice and Italian city-states there. The Kinasi are desert-dwelling people who are scholars and magicians and powerful mages. And they're definitely inspired by sort of Moorish Spain. There's a lot of kind of, Alhambra and that kind of style to them as well. The Rajuric, they're like hardy Northmen, classic kind of Scandinavian. And then the Vos are sort of like these brutal, primitive humans. They live in like the harshest places, and they are, maybe not the most nice people. They're not necessarily evil, but they're not nice either. So, the humans are pretty much humans. The J is pronounced like Y. Okay, so it's Rajuric. Rajuric. All right, I'll try to get that right. Well, we probably won't say it again. So that's our races, and then we have the elves, the elven court. There's dwarves and there's halflings. There's no gnomes. There's no half orcs. Okay. Oh, the Vos are supposed to be like Russian. Okay. I guess they went with like full Siberia for their like homelands. And then of course we have the regions that we were talking about before as well. So, on the continent of Cerilia, which we can see here, you have all these big different areas which are divided into these different kingdoms. The kingdoms are Anweir, which is, by the way, where the Anurians are from. The Brektur, which is where the Brecks are from. Kinasi, Rajuric, and Vosgard, which is where the Vos are from. And now that I see Vosgard, it definitely seems like it is more kind of Russian. So getting Derek to pronounce words right is a lost cause. I still stand by the fact that all of you can go fuck yourselves. That's what I still stand by. And then we get a bunch of information here about how Cerilia was occupied, in case we want to know these things for political reasons. But we can see the migration routes of the different tribes of humans into the continent of Cerilia. So you can see that the Anurians at the top, they moved in on the south into this region and have sort of spread all the way across the southern reaches. Oh, but they've been pushed back. Oh, look, in 973, they controlled the entire thing. But at the start of the campaign, look, our Anurians have been pushed back into the southwest corner of Cerilia. Okay. And we can see where the powers that be are found. So that was the Atlas of Cerilia. That's sort of the basic background of this campaign. Some of it's kind of tried and true, but some of it is, interesting and new. So then we get into the rule book. Now, this is 90 pages. This is the longest book by far. And we can see here in the table of contents, we've got information about how to make a birthright trademark, character. And some of this is, common AD&D character creation stuff, ability scores, but some of these things are tweaked and they're different, okay? We got the character classes, some new proficiencies, languages. Oh, but then we get into bloodlines. We get into regency, and then we get into domains, okay? So obviously we've got some new stuff in this, okay? And then domains have their whole thing, which is like domain terms and war cards. And then there's information about the Birthright campaign itself, okay? We can see information about the gods and priests, magic, and realm spells. Is anybody interested? I am. And some additional information. So let's get into it, okay? So, introduction. So, for purposes of this this long-winded thing, we need to get some terminology set, okay? The first slot is bloodlines, okay? Bloodlines were created when the heroes at the Battle of Mount Dismar were imbued with the essence of the gods. A character's bloodline is his heritage of divine power. They are described in two ways: its strength, which is represented by a number, and its heritage or derivation. And that basically means which blown up god did you get your powers from? Did you get your powers from the blown up god of the sea, or did you get your powers from the blown up god of dreams and the moon, right? Depending on which god your bloodline can trace your route through determines the kind of powers that you're going to have, okay? Now, to be clear, in this campaign, we'll get into this, but the idea is that 99% of the people in this campaign setting are not blooded. They do not have a magical bloodline. They are just an ordinary commoner. And the game does say, we'll get to this, but you can play as one of those if you want. If you can imagine already, there's several different ways that you could imagine this. Maybe you only have a handful of characters who have these magical bloodlines, and other characters or other people in the campaign are playing as their trusted lieutenants or their valuable generals, but they are just ordinary men and women. But by and large, we assume that your characters have these sort of bloodlines. And again, there's great strength. Some people, maybe your great-great-grandfather was a mighty ruler with a powerful bloodline. But, that bloodline has been sort of diluted over the years due to marrying with non-magical people, non-bloodline people. And now you have just the barest little twinge of magical power in your blood. Now, just because you are a magical, divine-powered bloodline does not necessarily, but by the way, another term for that what they use is called a scion. You may or may not have a domain, okay? A domain is something, an entity controlled by a character. It could be a kingdom or a province. It could be a guild, a temple, or even like a magical source, all right? If a scion, which again is somebody who has bloodline powers, if they rule a domain, they become known as a regent. And now they have regency points. All right, so let's be clear. You could have a bloodline. You could have divine power coursing through you, but maybe you don't rule a realm. Maybe you don't, have control over people. You're just a wandering person who, you're like Aragorn, right? Before the end of Return of the King. Okay, you're a badass and you're powerful, but you don't have that deep connection to the land. And again, this campaign setting is kind of built on the idea that maybe it's because of the unique nature of divine energy in which they draw strength from their followers and they give strength to their followers. But when a character with these unique bloodlines becomes a ruler, it literally empowers them. It literally empowers the land around them. So if a character has a bloodline, they don't have to rule a domain. But if they do, they are called a regent. All right. And you start to accumulate these things called regency points, which is a form of currency that you can use. It sort of represents how much energy you are drawing from your domain, from your kingdom, from your holdings. And then you can use those regency points to take, national army, big picture domain level actions. Okay. So domains may be comprised of any combination of provinces. Those are actually, physical areas on the map, or holdings. which might be like a guild hall or a temple or like a great source of magical energy. All right. And then we have the domain turn itself. And the game will get into this, but basically you're kind of playing D&D, but then every so often you have a domain turn. And a domain turn represents 3 months of time. And you get 3 actions. Oh, shit. It's the original 3-action economy. Each round is worth a month, which is why you get 3. And during this turn, you collect taxes, you raise armies, you engage in political or military endeavors, and you try to lead your domain to prosperity and power. Okay? So those are some of the common terms that we need to sort of know as we go forward. So let's get into character creation. All right? Again, I told you we're going deep. Get your money's worth, okay? First things first, Kingmaker. Let me get a crack open my Mountain Dew. Kingmaker clearly stole from this, says Damien. Yes, I am 100% sure. Birthright, for starters, recommends that you use method 5 of ability score creation, which should look very familiar to us modern D20 players, in which you roll 4d6 6 times, drop the lowest, and assign the ability scores as desired. Now, this is obviously very different than, Method 5 was an approved ability score, but this is obviously going to create typically stronger characters than with what a lot of people were playing with back in the day. And the idea is that, your characters are supposed to be kind of a cut above. And so this game recommends that you use Method 5, which again is going to let you roll potentially higher than average ability scores. All right. So that's one thing to note. Note, by the way, that back in 2nd edition, AD&D, the Birthright campaign allows players to choose from 9 character races: dwarf, elf, halfling, and then the 5 distinct human cultures: Anurian, Brecht, Kenasi, Rurik, and Vos. So, of course, back in the day, if you wanted to be a demi-human, you had to have minimum ability scores, also potentially maximum ability scores. So, for example, if you want to be an elf, you have to have a charisma of at least 10. If you're a dwarf, you have to have a strength and a con of at least 13. Otherwise, you cannot be a dwarf. There are no weak and frail dwarves. Okay. If your ability scores, which you rolled, fit within those, you can choose those. By the way, note, all human characters must belong to a subrace. There is no generic human in Cerilia, okay? And as you can see here, after you've picked your race, and by the way, humans can be any, you don't have any mins or maxes. But if you qualify to be a dwarf, elf, half-elf, or halfling, then you will go ahead and adjust your ability scores. So some things that were fairly common, but there are some differences here than you would see in traditional AD&D 2nd edition. Like, for example, dwarves are +2 con, -2 dex. That's pretty normal. But elves are actually +1 dex, +1 int, -1 con, -1 strength. So a little bit different. And then the various 5 sub-races of humans back then just didn't get any ability score modifications. But in this game, you do. Now, it's only +1, -1, but this sort of shows you the differences between the 5 sub-tribes of human. Okay? So, again, at the time, 1995, this would have been like, oh, that's so cool, right? Like, I can't believe it. Like, a human with ability score modifiers? This is some wild shit. All right. By the way, some of this is just sort of a throwback for those of us who used to play back in AD&D 2nd edition. The game has its own racial level limits. That's right. If you were a dwarf, you could be a fighter, a priest, not actually a cleric, a priest, or a thief. And you were limited to the maximum level that you could get in that level. So if you're a dwarf fighter, you can go all the way to level 15. But if you're a dwarf thief, you can only get to level 8. In this particular campaign, now again, this table here existed in AD&D 2nd edition But this is a unique table specific to Birthright. And one of the things that you can see, for example, is that elves can go unlimited. That's what the U means. The U means unlimited in Wizard, because elves are very magical in this world. They actually are the primary spellcasters. Okay. Half elves can get unlimited in Bard, and halflings can get unlimited in Thief. So we can see here that, humans are unrestricted in all classes, but only Anurians and Kinasi, maybe paladins. Dwarves can be multi-classed fighter priests or fighter thieves, or they could be those three. Elves can be fighter mages, fighter thieves, or thief mages. Half elves can pretty much be any combination of classes. And halflings can be fighter thieves or ranger priests. Now, again, if you're familiar with AD&D 2nd edition, you will also notice that there are no fighter mage thieves or fighter mage clerics, which is another thing that you couldn't do. That's correct, Jay. Humans could not multiclass, right? When you multiclassed in old school D&D, you did it at the beginning of the game. It wasn't like you could splash a level of thief or pick up a couple of levels of cleric. That wasn't something that didn't exist until 3rd edition D&D. Back in 2nd edition AD&D and 1st edition AD&D, only the demi-humans, the dwarves, the elves, the half-elves, the halflings could be multiclassed. And by the way, multiclassing was OP. Okay, if let's say we're a dwarf, okay, and we choose to be a fighter priest, basically a fighter cleric. Guess what? In modern day terms, do you know what we would call that? Gestalt. You get all of the fighter stuff, and you get all of the priest stuff. You are, for all intents and purposes, a level 1 fighter and a level 1 priest. Okay, you get everything. Okay, but when you gain, we're getting way off the reservation here, but you know what? We're welcome to it. But here's the thing. When you got experience points, okay, it got divided between your two classes. All right. So if the human, let's say you have a human in the party and they're just a fighter, or again, you could also be a dwarf and just be a fighter. Okay. You could just be an ordinary old dwarven fighter. Okay. But if we've gotten 2,000 experience points, the human fighter is now level 2 and the dwarf fighter is now level 2. But our character would still be level 1 because we would have put 1,000 XP into each of those classes. All right. And when one of those classes got to enough experience points to be level 2 in that class, then we would be a level 2 fighter. And then we would be a level 2 priest. Now, you didn't, to be fair, you didn't like stack your hit points. So for example, if you roll, when you rolled your fighter hit points, you would roll D10 and then divide by 2. And when you rolled your priest hit points, you would roll D8 and you would divide by 2. So it's kind of an average, but by and large, your character could basically have both classes, which is why, even though people complained about it endlessly, which led to the change in 3rd edition, this is why racial level limits aren't as bad as they seem. In fact, if you'll notice, dwarves can go all the way to level 15 in fighter, and they can be fighter priests or fighter thieves. What is this telling us? Well, if we go back to basic D&D, okay, if we go all the way back to basic D&D and to original D&D, dwarf wasn't a race. It was a class, okay? There wasn't a distinction between classes and races back then. All right. You could be a human fighter. You could be a human magic user. You could be a human cleric. You could be a human thief, or you could be an elf, a dwarf, or a halfling. Those were the classes. So the idea was basically all dwarves were fighters. They just all were fighters. Now in 2nd edition D&D, and I guess in 1st edition AD&D, they let you change that up a little bit. But the idea was they kind of still wanted to encourage you to do that. So the idea was if you were a dwarf, you would make yourself a fighter priest. And yes, you are limited to level 12. And yes, you are limited to level 15. But remember, you're putting half as much experience points into each of those, and you're getting all of the benefits. So the idea is that by the time that the human characters are near max level, your character is actually still really, really, really powerful, and you might not ever even hit these racial level limits. Anyways, going off on a wrong tangent. Also, we didn't talk about dual classing, but this is not an AD&D second edition campaign thing, or an AD&D second edition, but I did think it's interesting to note here. So we can see that half elves could kind of be anything, and that was kind of their shtick back in the day as well. Yeah, so we've got information about dwarves, and you know what? Dwarves in this campaign setting are pretty standard, right? They live in the mountains. They're stocky, 4.5 feet. Okay. They're tough. They're gruff. They tend to be kind of neutral, good aligned, right? They do get some interesting abilities here, though. Look at this. They do not get any bonuses to attack certain monsters and have no special abilities of fighting giants. The dwarves don't hate the giants here. But against Orogs, which are kind of like their version of it's like Orog is like their orc, but it's like a subterranean orc that's kind of like evil and lives in the ground. But against Orogs and ogres, they subtract 2 from any attacks against them. And a dwarf's dense body suffers only half damage from bludgeoning or crushing attacks. All right. Also, in this campaign, they can carry an enormous amount of weight. And for purposes of encumbrance, their strength is calculated as being 4 points higher. All right. But by and large, dwarves are kind of, the dwarves that we all come to know and love. So for the elves, they only have one race. They're called the Shilin. And they are all dark-haired. They're all fair-skinned and dark-haired. So very, different from a lot of people envision elves as being sort of, flowing blonde hair. But these were more like, God, what is it? The Noldor elves, from Tolkien. They are dark, and they are immortal. Okay, and they are magic users. Okay, and they have. And again, we can see the shades of Tolkien here. These creatures are immortal. They are affected by the world. And you can see here, they're very emotional beings, but elves in this campaign setting in Cerilia can pass without trace as per the magical spell in natural settings and ignore ground characteristics when moving or marching. An elf can travel over heavy snow, soft sand, or treacherous mountainside as easily as a human would walk across a floor. There's a very famous scene where, in Tolkien, elves are sort of untouched by the hazards of the natural world. There's a scene in Fellowship of the Ring where they're climbing over the peak, and they're taking the path of Caradhras. And you can see that everybody else is like crushing through the snow, and Legolas is literally walking on top of the snow. So very clearly stolen from this idea of Tolkien that the elves are sort of like so intrinsically tied to nature that they are almost immune to it. Half elves are basically half elves. Halflings are particularly interesting in this world. Okay. Halflings aren't a numerous people. Only a handful of humans know the secret origin of the halflings. They once dwelled in the shadow world, a realm of fairy enchantment parallel to Cerilia. That realm was poisoned by the, evil darkness. Okay. And they fled to this normal world. Okay. So they're literally from this parallel dimension, a shadow realm. And you might think, oh, that's why they're good at sneaking around and being kind of hidden. Yeah. Except look at this. You ready for this? Halflings possess the ability to see into the shadow world. By concentrating for 1 round, this allows them to detect evil, detect undead, and detect magic, necromancy only, in the real world with a 75% chance of success. This talent functions as per the wizard spell, a 5th level ability, and can be performed as often as the halfling wishes. By concentrating for a round, a halfling is able to perform all 3 detections at once. So it's kind of like, like in Lord of the Rings, like when Frodo puts on the ring and he's like taken to the shadow realm and he can see things and see, the faces of the Nazgul, and he can look across, right? It's almost like the same idea. Halflings just have this innate ability. But wait, there's more. Halflings may also note the places. I guess there's no way I can only partially zoom in. Halflings may also note the places where the barriers between worlds are thin, and they may use their innate powers to dimension door or shadow walk. at the 10th level of ability. 3 times per week, a halfling may use any combination of these abilities. The chance of success depends on the closeness of the shadow world, ranging from just 10% if you do it on a sunny summer day in a civilized region to 100% if you use one of these abilities on a cold winter night in a wild area or a crypt. Halflings will reveal these abilities only to persons they know or trust. Now, if these aren't the coolest fucking halflings that we've ever seen, I don't know what is. And this totally explains, right, why they're so sneaky and why they tend to be thieves and they tend to be kind of on the down low. Very cool. I was like blown away by this, So yes. Well, Kyle, I say halflings that were more like gnomes. It depends what gnomes you're talking about, because if we're talking about gnomes from AD&D, second edition and first edition, AD&D gnomes had nothing to do with the other planes or the fairy or the fae. That was something that got kind of added, I think, in 4th edition D&D and certainly in Pathfinder. Anyways, and this is just, look, you just get this ability, I mean, halflings in Dark Sun were cannibals. Derek, as I recall. I mean, gnomes in AD&D second edition were basically just like Disney Seven Dwarves lawn gnome characters. They were pretty kind of weird and strange. I actually liked what Paizo did with gnomes. I felt like they didn't go far enough down that whole they're from the Feywild thing. All right, and then we've got our humans. We're not going to go too much into these. Again, we talked a little bit about these, but again, there's the 5 sub-races of humans, the 5 tribes, the 5 things. So you have the Anurians, the Brex, the Ryuric, the Vos, and the Kanasi. All right? And there's lots of cool detail here about them and their cultures and all this other stuff. So that's it for character races. So already, I think that's pretty cool. We have some pretty cool stuff going on that was different from AD&D second edition at the time. All right, let's get into classes. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit out of pocket, okay? Because let's start with the fighter. Well, to be a fighter, you have to have a strength of 9 or higher. And if your prime requisite is strength, what the hell is a prime requisite, Derek? Well, in AD&D second edition, if your prime requisite stat was high enough, you actually got a bonus to experience points. So that means that if you're a fighter and your strength is high, you would actually gain a bonus to your experience. 10%, maybe 20% wasn't potentially out of the line. I think it might be 20%, but it could be 10 or 20. I may be misremembering. But, so if the other fighter got 1,000 experience points, you would get 1,100 experience points because you were just really good at fighting because you were so strong. All right. So one of the things that they actually say here, which I love, of all the regents, and remember from our keyword terms, a regent is a bloodline scion who is also the ruler of a domain. If you have both a magical bloodline and you're the ruler of a domain, you are called a regent, aka magical king, queen, lord person. All right. That's what regent means. Out of all the regents in Cerilia, fighters, regents, outnumber all the rest of the other classes. Blooded, that means that you have not bloodied from 4th edition, blooded, meaning you have the divine spark. Fighters often set out to expand their kingdoms by sheer force. Fighters are completely normal. They have everything that they have in the player's handbook, except followers are gained differently. If you are a fighter regent, aka you have a bloodline, you are controlling a kingdom, and by the way, you can start the game like that, you automatically begin play with 4d6 plus 10 elite bodyguards, which are 0th level fighters with 1d4 plus 4 hit points each, and they are led by a 1st level sergeant. These bodyguards are of the same race as the regent and are equipped as detailed in Table 4. That's right, 4d6 plus 10. That's an average of what, 24? Plus a sergeant. So you have 25 men. They could be full-out knights with field plates, heavy warhorse and chain barding. You could have a unit of heavy cav with banded mail, plate armor, pole arms. All right. This is how you start the game, because if you're a regent, it means not only are you a magical, divinely blooded character, but you also rule something. You have control. All right. These bodyguards do not require payment. The regent's domain maintenance, which is basically like what you have to pay to run your realm, includes their payroll, housing, and equipment. They will accompany the regent anywhere. However, this is how the game keeps it from being broken. However, these troops are counted in the division of experience points. The regent must decide whether these troops' assistance is worth the relatively small return in experience points. So if you go in there with your 25 heavy infantry and you go, yeah, boy, we killed that, we got that. Oh shit, we got 500 experience points. Guess what? 500 experience points is going to get divided by 26. The 25 followers that you have, and then one for you. All right. And so you're like, oh, okay. So yeah. So I got like 40 XP, not 1,000. And that's pretty cool. Also it's a cool way for eventually for your loyal band of companions, right, to follow up. And to be fair, remember, as your character gains higher levels, the idea is that you're gonna have armies, you're gonna have whole units. This is like your personal retinue, right? Like this is like your crew. And they're they start at 0th level. You're only 1st level, by the way. But the idea is that as you bring them on adventures, you might be 8th level, and now it's like, oh yeah, they're all like level 2 and 3 and stuff like that. And maybe some die along the way. Like you could easily see that these characters become, part of your, entourage, and they become as much a part of your character as you are. So pretty cool. That's where the fighter does. And then they talk about like, what if you're a fighter that doesn't have a domain? But we won't worry about that. Of course, we have a domain. We have information about paladins. Paladins are very similar. By the way, again, I can't point out. Again, to be a paladin, we talked about this on our paladin stream. Strength 12, Constitution 9, Wisdom 13, Charisma 17. Pretty tough. And if you want to get that bonus experience points, you have to have a high strength and a high charisma. So it's tough. Now, paladins are much like a fighter in that they begin play with 4d6 plus 10 bodyguards, just as a fighter regent has as well. Yeah, exactly, Lord Dragon. You start with your own Kingsguard. You're a regent. You're a lord. You're a lady, Yeah, you ain't going to be a pally. Well, with 4d6, drop low, arrange to taste, there's a chance. Okay, but if you're doing 3d6, or if you're doing 4d6 drop low in order, the odds of it happening are very, very low. By the way, Rangers are also no slouch. They need 13, 13, 14, 14. They have 3 prime requisites, okay? And again, they also start with these bodyguards, okay? Now, what's interesting here, though, okay, Rangers gain their followers from the table in the AD&D Player's Handbook. So the standard, now the Rangers follower chart, I don't remember it exactly, but it had some weirder stuff in there, right? Like centaurs, dryads, maybe bears and animals. Okay. I think. So the Rangers followers weren't just like, oh, men at arms and, knights. It was like wilderness wood shit. But look at this. We got a little bit of a thing here. A ranger forfeits all experience gained in an adventure if he is accompanied by more than 1 NPC per 3 levels. Followers gained from table 19 in the Player's Handbook don't count against this number. A fighter might be accompanied by soldiers to watch over the party's camp or handle large numbers of low-level appointments, but a true ranger prides himself on self-reliance. NPCs affiliated with another member of the ranger's adventuring group do not count against the ranger. So other people can bring their NPCs along, but as a ranger, you do it on your own, and you can only bring along a couple of your companions. If you bring along your whole crew as a ranger, you don't get any experience points. You're not doing it right. So again, remember, this is if you're a ranger lord, right? So, I mean, you know, maybe there's, again, shades of Aragorn there, right? But, you know, this idea that you're off doing it yourself, even if you're the king, right? Even if you're the lord of the, you know, you're the lord of the Temberley Woods, and you have, you know, this domain of these ancient verdant woodlands that you are tied to by blood. You still take care of business yourself, you know? Then we have priests in this game. In AD&D 2nd edition, actually, cleric was a subclass of a category called the priest. Cleric and druid were under the priest heading. But there is no cleric in this game. You basically pick one of the Cerilian gods, and then that tells you what weapons and armor and what spheres of influence you get power to. Okay. In some cases, these are similar to what we would normally think of from a cleric, but in some cases, they are also quite different. All right. Now, there's another change. Druids are pretty rare, I think. Yeah. And druid, because in AD&D 2nd edition, druids were just specialty priests. So basically, if you're a priest of Eric, who is like the god of the woods, gods of the wilderness, you're basically a druid. So there's two classes that look like they are a mage. There's the wizard, and then there is the magician. Now, the wizard, note the races allowed. You need to have int 9, but you can only be it if you are an elf or a half-elf. Those are the people that have the innate magical blood. Or if you are one of the divinely touched humans. In other words, the only people who are true wizards in this world are elves, people with elven blood, or people with magic god blood, okay? And when we think of the wizard class, we're thinking of the traditional, D&D wizard, get Fireball, get Cone of Cold, get Meteor Swarm. This is basically all the way up, okay? They are capable of casting true magic and casting the most powerful spells, okay? Along with high sorcery, literally realm-shaping magic. In addition, we start with a bodyguard of 2d6 plus 5 soldiers. So what's the magician for? The magician, you'll notice, actually has higher ability requirements than the wizard, which is kind of funny. The magician is for people who aren't elves and people who aren't divinely blessed with blood. Okay? Wizards who are restricted to lesser magic are known as magicians or seers in Cerilia. Magicians must work harder at their craft than true mages. Magicians lack the innate magical ability that characters of elven descent and scions of the bloodlines harbor. Magicians must also be more creative in their spellcasting due to the limited choice of spells. So basically, you can see here that you get illusion. You're considered to be a specialist in illusion and divination. You get a bonus to learn those spells, but you get a penalty to learn any other spell. So you're mostly just like, tarot cards and crystal balls and illusions. You're not like, firestorms and ice storms. The idea here is that the power of magic is actually pretty restricted to the elves or people of elven descent or to these magical blooded people. All right. And we have thief. And by the way, thieves also get to start with their own personal bodyguard. Okay. If you rule a domain. All right. In addition, so here, all common and blooded thieves operate as detailed in the PHB. Thief regents, remember that means that you both have a divine bloodline and you rule a domain. That's a regent. May command a personal retinue. A thief regent who rules a province, in addition to his guilds, may gain 4d6 plus 10 bodyguards. If the regent doesn't rule a province, he gains 2d6 plus 5 0-level thugs, informants, spies, or smugglers. These criminals aren't interested in open field battles or chasing Anshaleen, I think is how that's pronounced. Basically, Anshaleen are like evil blood magic creatures from the dark god that blew up, and won't leave the province under normal circumstances. In addition, The Thief Regent has thugs available in all of their guild holdings. The number of thugs available equals 2d6 plus the level of the holding. The locals won't leave their native province, but can provide a regent with additional informants and muscle whenever visiting your holdings. All right. If the regent is a merchant prince, as opposed to an underworld figure, these thugs are instead employees, craftsmen, or workers. Anyways. And then we have a bard. They are revered as historians, heralds, messengers, and advisors. Their neutrality is respected in all but the most barbaric of lands. And I believe bards are kind of strange because they do not typically become regents. You can have a divine bloodline and be a bard, but they do not, while priests control temples and thieves run guilds, a bard has no special holding or commodity to call his own. A bard gains no special rewards for controlling people or controlling lands. It's actually a violation of the oath of neutrality. If a character is destined to inherit a kingdom or rise to prominence, the bardic colleges will not accept him. So, and then lastly, someone said something about psionics. Psionics are unknown in Cerilia. So, it does say if you want, you can play one, but the default assumption is that there is no psionics in this game. And then they get a list of all the kits that are appropriate for Birthright, and that is our information on classes. So, pretty standard, but we see a couple of changes here. We see that first level characters are starting with a personal retinue of 25 mounted knights. We're seeing that, wizards are restricted to just super powerful elves and these unique divine blooded characters. Now, next is proficiencies, which we'll mostly skip over because these are proficiencies. They were introduced in AD&D 2nd edition. They were basically the beginning of a skill system in D&D, and you can see that they introduced some new ones. They were actually called non-weapon proficiencies. There was weapon proficiencies, and those existed even in AD&D 1st edition. They told you what weapons and armor you could use, weapon and armor proficiencies. And then there was something called non-weapon proficiencies, which nowadays we would just call skills. But they introduced some new ones here. Administration, diplomacy, intrigue, law, leadership, siegecraft, and strategy. Because, again, this is a game about high-level politics and warfare. And the standard AD&D game at the time was about, dungeon crawling and adventuring. So these kind of things were lacking. So we're going to skip these. We've got some information about languages. Again, we're going to skip this. What kind of equipment is available and what cultures or races have access to certain things. Nobody has access to the hand crossbow, apparently. If you're a Ruyurkan or you're an Anurian or an elf, you can get a longbow. If you're not, get fucked. Nobody can wield the power of the staff sling. Anyways. Same thing with armor. Okay. And they also give us some new weapons as well. That's a nice looking weapon, huh? I like this Claymore. 2d4/2d8. Yeah, weapons in AD&D 2nd edition, by the way, did more damage or less damage sometimes against bigger targets. I don't really recall why, but they did. Go figure. Anyways. So up to this point, we're mostly a normal character. All right. And now we get into the bloodlines. And by the way, for purposes of this, we are on page 20 of like 80 from this book. So, and it's already 8:30. So, settle in. All right. Bloodline. All right. All characters begin play as either a commoner or as a scion of an ancient bloodline. You get to pick. Only blooded characters can become regents. Now, you could be a commoner and still technically be in charge of something. You could even be a ruler, but you won't have these special superpowers, okay? So only blooded characters can be regents and thus rule their domains. But hundreds of blooded characters also exist who don't rule kingdoms. You might be the cousin of the king, of the queen. You might be the second or third son or daughter in the relations. You might be another relation that isn't in line for the crown. Okay? Characters who have common origins aren't automatically peasants just because they do not descend from an ancient bloodline. You could come from any level of society. In fact, great numbers of high-born nobles, courtiers, advisors, government officials come from a mundane, bloodline. All right? There are two good reasons. I like that they say this. There are two good reasons to play a common character, aka one that does not have a bloodline. First, you avoid the responsibilities of ruling a kingdom. That's fair. Second, role-playing a squire, advisor, wizard, or captain in the service of another player character can be fun. And I'll admit, 13-year-old Derek or whatever, 14-year-old Derek would not have really understood this line, okay? But Derek of today, in his 40s, I go, yeah, actually it'd be kind of cool to not be the super-powered scion. I'm just like the loyal man at arms, right? That sort of like, do or die. If you've ever seen Count of Monte Cristo, the movie, Jim Caviezel's character, the Count of Monte Cristo, Zatara, he's obviously cool. He's a badass. He's the protagonist, but he's got his man for life, that do or die, ride or die henchman, Jacopo. And it'd be kind of cool to play that character, So I think that's pretty cool. So you may not do it. Also, spoiler alert. If you choose to be someone who doesn't have these magical bloodline powers, the game gives you a bonus to your experience points. Maybe you might try to explain it in game being like, well, you got to work harder than everybody else and you're more driven because you don't have magical blood powers to rely on, right? You got to do it the own way. So you're more driven. So you get more experience points. But basically, if you aren't a blooded character, you're going to get a bonus to your XP. And so you will level up faster than your, divinely infused rulers, other people in your party. All right. So first, you got to determine your character's bloodline strength. The blood of an ancient hero may run undiluted in a character's vein, or you may have only the most tenuous claim to a bloodline. This is identified by your bloodline strength. Now, this is what's important here. It's a number that represents basically how strong is the divine power in your blood, right? If you can imagine, however many generations ago, right, one of your ancestors was there at the battle of Mount Dismar and became infused with divine power. Well, if that person married a commoner, then the bloodline power got cut in half. And if that person married a commoner, then the bloodline power got cut in half. And so on and so forth over the generations till it gets to you, it might be very, very tenuous. Or that bloodline character could have married another bloodline character, and thus the strength or the power of that is sort of redeemed. But there's something else. Over time, the character's bloodline may grow stronger through wise rule as a regent, or by confronting the scions of other bloodlines and defeating them in heroic combat. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream, but your character's bloodline isn't just decided at birth. A person who starts off with the most tenuous of bloodlines, a very weak, strength, if you go out and do great things and become a powerful regent ruling over a powerful domain, your bloodline itself will get stronger. If you go full Highlander, okay, on other blooded characters and you defeat them in single combat, exactly, Duncan, except you don't cut off their head. You have to kill them with a thrust through the heart. And if you do that, you gain part of their power. Okay? So this means that your character's bloodline can actually change and grow over the course of the campaign. All right? Similarly, if you are a blooded character, if you are defeated by another scion, you lose some of your bloodline strength. Thus, most regents and scions are cautious of possible encounters with others of their kind, since scions have been known to kill each other for the power of their blood. The creatures, known as the Angeline, the evil-blooded characters, do so without hesitation. Okay? A character who is designed to be a scion of one of the bloodlines, rolls on table 10 to determine their strength and score. So let's say we're sitting down to make a character. You can decide I'm going to be a commoner and not have a bloodline, or you could decide I'm going to be a scion of an ancient bloodline of divine power. I'm going to be this. And we roll. We roll D percentage, and we either get that the strength of our score, it's either tainted, minor, major, or great. And then once we know what our strength is, we roll the number result, and that is our bloodline score. So per this table, the lowest you could get is a 4, and the highest we could get is a 64. Okay, so now again, this is back in the day. We said unshalin. Okay, unshalin. All right, I think the game does give you a pronunciation, so that probably is correct if you're saying it that way, because I know you played this campaign. Yeah. Anyways, evil abomination creatures. But this is long before. No, don't trust me. This is long before point buy and stuff. Somebody sits down and they roll and they go, yeah, I want to be a bloodline character, and you're like, yay, and you roll. You're like, oh, cool, I got minor. And you roll your 5d6 and you go, okay, my bloodline score is 12, or 14. Everyone's like, yay. And then someone, boom, rolls a 98. They go, I have a great bloodline. They roll 8d8. They're like, oh shit, my bloodline score is 60. Right? I am the undiluted true king who can trace my lineage back through ancient royalty all the way back. You are but a son of a peasant. It could happen. And again, they describe this here, but tainted bloodlines are very diluted by commoners in the family tree, or maybe it was never that strong of a line to begin with, right? Maybe you had a once great, powerful ancestor. Maybe your great-great-grandfather was actually a noble hero, but then his son, who is your great-grandfather, lost his realm, and the power of the bloodline, shrunk. And by the time, your father and your father's father came around, the bloodline had been weakened. Minor, major, great, and true bloodlines originate from only one source, the chosen champion of one of the gods. You can't start at this level of power. All right. The next thing is, where did your bloodline come from? What they call the derivation. This basically means which of the gods that were there at the battle that blew up is your bloodline tied to. Okay. And so you roll on this percentage table, and you get that either it's from Andurias, Rainier, Brenna, Basaya, Masala, Vorin, or Azrai. Azrai is the dark god, by the way. So this is going to sort of kind of determine what kind of powers and abilities that you have. All right. So again, just talking about all these things here. Once you know your bloodline strength, you're going to roll on this table to determine what abilities that you gain. All right. So case in point. Now, this table's a little weird. You roll for every category that you have met or exceeded. So for example, if our starting bloodline strength was a 25, we would roll on this table 0 to 90, 91 to 100, see if we get a minor. Then we would roll on the 11 to 19. So we would roll on this table, which goes from here to here. And because we have a 25, we would also roll on this table. All right. So we would actually get 3 rolls when we were 25. If through play, we got our bloodline score up to 29, we would then immediately get to roll on this table. So if your bloodline starts off at 6 or 7, there's a good chance that you won't start off with any powers. But that's okay. You do have a divine bloodline. You can increase it through your great deeds, but you're not going to have any sort of magical sauce. Remember our character who said was a badass and rolled like a 60? Okay, they're going to be rolling on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. Okay, so they're definitely going to have some magical powers. Okay. And we can see here, we're not going to go through all of these, obviously, but you can see that this is a table that you roll on. All right. Now there is a couple that I'm going to call out here. Could a commoner get the chosen champion of a god? No, they could not. So you've got these magical blood abilities. And you can see that some of them apply to any power, but some of them are restricted to only the major and great powers, like having a divine aura, right? Having the ability of divine wrath, okay? Regeneration, resistance, travel. But, you can see here that travel is actually a fairly common one. Rule of Cool says I rolled 97. I'm a badass. So this is actually a good one. So you can see there's 5% chance that you can get travel. So let's take a look at travel. Remember, you're a first level character. Okay, here we go. Travel. This potent ability allows a scion to use a limited form of teleportation based on his derivation, what god it came from. Anything the character wears or carries is teleported with him, and the character may take one companion with him for each level. A character may use this power once per week for every 5 levels. Thus, at level 5 through 9, you can teleport twice a week. The character must know his destination through a prior visit or by using some form of magical viewing or scrying. Okay, what if we are tied to Azrai? That's the dark god. Well, we can enter the shadow world between sunset and sunrise, gaining the ability to shadow walk in the same manner as halflings. This character must find a place of intersection where the shadow world is near. This can be accomplished by various means or the blood ability enhanced sense. What if we are a follower of Basaya? We step into a flame large enough to immerse our entire body and emerge from a flame of similar size. What about Brenna? A scion of Brenna who stands on any road, path, or trail can travel to any point on that same road or any road that splits from it. Generally, this allows them to travel from any point of Cerilia to almost any destination on the continent. What about Macella? Macella's children can cross bodies of water. By standing in the shallows of a river, lake, or sea, the blooded character can move to any point on its shore. And lastly, Vorin, a character of Vorin's line, can travel at moonrise or moonset to any destination. But the timing is critical. The character only has about 10 minutes per day in which this ability will function. So, I mean, obviously that's really cool. And it just oozes like flavor, and it's not balanced, right? Clearly some of those are really powerful and some of them are less powerful. But it oozes flavor, and but it makes a mechanical difference. It's not just like, oh, you're from this god, oh, you're from this god, oh, you're from this god. Well, you all gain the ability to teleport without error twice a day or twice a week, right? That's how like a lot of modern games would do that, right? I thought this particular power was really cool, and there's a lot of other really, really cool powers here, including regeneration, which back in the day was a really big deal. You get back 1 hit point per hour. Oh my god, that's so much. Remember, normally you used to get back 1 hit point per day. Take care, AGM. So, remember, our characters could be divinely blooded or not. If they are divinely blooded, we roll to see what our strength is. All right, so we've gone through we made our character. And then we said, yeah, we're going to give them blood. But now we have to make the ultimate choice, which is, like, are we going to rule something? Okay. Now, by the way, fans of Pendragon will take note here. This game does talk about the potential lineage and breeding options available to you. Because when a child is born to a scion of an ancient bloodline, they get the strength and derivation of one parent. The child gains the bloodline of the parent with the stronger bloodline, but the strength is diluted by the weaker bloodline and becomes the average of the two. For example, a father derived of Brenna with a strength of 40, that's the bloodline strength, and a mother derived of Renier with a strength of 30 bear a child. The child will become the bloodline of Brenna because the father's strength is 40, which is higher. But at birth, the child will have a strength of 35, which is the average of the parent. So obviously, if you have a child with a commoner who has bloodline of 0, your bloodline strength cuts in half. Now, keep in mind that that's only at birth. They don't gain or lose bloodline powers after birth, right? Because your father might have and then go on to become like the greatest king ever known or die in shame, it doesn't affect you at that point. Only at the time of your birth. All right. But wait, you can also pass your bloodline. That's right. A character can voluntarily pass their bloodline to another character by participating in the ceremony of investiture. All right. The recipient of the bloodline increases their bloodline all the way up to the power of the donor, while the donor goes down to a bloodline strength of 0. In effect, they give up all of their heritages and pass it to another individual. If the recipient's bloodline strength is already stronger than that of the donor, it only goes up by 1 point. So if my strength was 90 and somebody with strength 50 donated to me, I would just go to 91. Okay. But so obviously there's this cool idea, right? Where like, this character passes on their divine lineage, but there's actually a practical reason for this. This altruistic act normally occurs when a parent has gone on great conquests and gained great honor after the birth of a child. So when the child was born, that maybe you, the father, only had a bloodline strength of 30. And so you pass that on to your child. But now you have gone on and you've gained great conquest, and your bloodline now he is your heir, or she's your heir. And now you are an old man, you're ready to step down. And you wish to pass the stronger bloodline to your offspring rather than allowing it to just disappear with your death. Additionally, a ruler without heirs may ennoble a trusted advisor and thus designate him as heir. So being someone's heir in this game is huge because it means that they might invest their bloodline strength to somebody and elevate you essentially to the same power level as they were. And it's kind of a way of you like passing on your divine legacy that you built up. Characters are rarely forced to give up their bloodlines, although the threat of death, hostages, mind-controlling enchantments, or similar dirty tricks may persuade them to participate in the investiture voluntarily. So you could imagine a situation, right, where like they're holding your family hostage and they're going to kill them unless you give your power up. Like, that's pretty cool stuff. All right, regency. So while many scions and abominations wander with noble heritages and potent blood abilities, their powers have little significance without a domain to control. Okay, blooded characters who control kingdoms are blessed with a mystical connection to the land, a right to rule that infuses them with supernatural powers, supernatural responsibilities, and supernatural benefits. All right, so basically this is, all right, you've got all these cool bloodline powers. What are you going to do with it? All right. In game terms, this is when a bloodline character becomes a ruler, this is called regency. All right. And in game terms, regency is married by an RP score, right? The regency points, all right, which is just like hit points and bloodline strength. Okay. Not everybody who has a bloodline will gain a regency score. Only regents, that is blooded characters who rule a domain, will gain a regency point score. All right. Scions who choose not to rule domains never gain regency points, nor do any characters who do not have a divine bloodline. All right. A ruler's regency points can be used to increase the power of your bloodline or to increase the success of ruling your domain. Essentially, it is a resource that you gain from the strength of your domain, and then you can use it to, empower your domain or empower your bloodline. I mentioned before Highlander. Well, here it is. Usurpation, blood theft. When two scions meet in battle and one dies, special circumstances may allow the slayer to gain a part of the victim's bloodline powers. All right. If a blooded character, that's someone with a divine bloodline, dies a natural death or perishes at the hand of a commoner, his bloodline is unaffected, and all of his bloodline characteristics die with him. If a regent character dies in a similar manner, his heir assumes the regent's domain and his regency points, but the heir does not gain any of their blood strength or abilities. If A regent dies as a result of another blooded character piercing them through the heart. The victim's regency points are lost, and the slayer's bloodline score goes up. Worst case scenario. If a victim pierced through the heart was the last of his line, the killer's bloodline increases by 1 point for every 5 points of their strength score, and the killer also gets all of their regency points. Essentially, the killer becomes the new ruler of your domain. They get all of your regency points if you do not have an heir, if you are the last of your line. So, you know, that you can imagine that sets up, you know, when you think about Game of Thrones and people killing off people's heirs, you can imagine how much that makes a big deal. So pretty nasty stuff. But the long and the short of it is, if your character, it does make me think of the one. That's pretty funny. We built, when we played our superhero campaign, our entire superhero multiverse worked off of the idea of the premise of the one. Assuming you mean the Jet Li movie. So, to wit, your character can be born as a commoner, or when you make your character, you can be a commoner, or you can have a powerful magical bloodline. If you choose to have a powerful magical bloodline, you might get some special magical abilities. If you choose to have a powerful magical bloodline, you can also choose to start the game as a regent in charge of some territory, or in charge of some kingdom, or in charge of some temple or guild. If you do that, your character gets to start with their own personal retinue of 0th level characters, and you gain something called a regency score, a tracking system that tracks how much energy you have drawn from the lands around you, which you can use to increase the power of your bloodline and to rule your realm and be, you know, a badass ruler. I should note that if you aren't the ruler of a kingdom, the only way that you could increase your bloodline score is by killing other people who have blooded abilities. All right. So we just kind of said this. This means that 3 types of characters exist in a Birthright campaign: Scions, Regents, and Unblooded. All right. Scions get their bloodline powers, but nothing from Regency. Regents get the whole shebang, right? They are blooded characters who hold domains. Domains can be kingdoms, guild networks, temple sects, or collections of magical power. All right. A character may be a king or a duke or a count. All right. And lastly, unblooded characters make up 99%. All right. So what happens if you make your character that king or queen or princess? Well, you make your character as per normal, you get your bloodline powers, and you gain a permanent 10 bonus hit points at character creation. Your 1st level fighter with 7 hit points is raised to 17. You are a god among men. No one, everyone, all shall fear her wrath. She is coming for you direct. 10 whole hit points. All right. So they give you a little bit of plot armor in the form of a bonus to hit points. Also, wait, we're not done. You rule a fucking kingdom. All right. You get your choice of either rolling for a random magical item used by your class, or beginning play with a mount and any non-magical armor or weapons that you wish to select. As a ruler, you have access to money and resources that other beginning characters cannot begin to tap. So we get a kingdom, we get special magical powers, we get our own personal crew of bodyguard, we get a mount, any armor and weapons that we want, or a magic item. It's a pretty good deal. What if we're not one of those people? Well, if you're not magical at all, you get a special plus 10% bonus to your experience point. Cheers. But again, honestly, if you're choosing to do that, it's either because you just don't care about any of that stupid realm management stuff, or because you think it'd be fun to play as, you know, sort of essentially just because you're unblooded doesn't mean you're a commoner like a peasant. You might still be a very powerful noble or a very powerful merchant. You just don't have the special divine strength. All right. So that's how you make a character in Birthright. That's true. That's also true, Isaiah. You don't want to be hunted down and have your bloodline constantly under attack and under a week. All right. Now it's 9 o'clock. So this is where we would normally end, but we're going to keep going. We're going to talk a little bit about domains and the domain turn. And we'll probably skip the war stuff because that'll probably be too complicated. But and that's kind of where we'll wrap up. All right. So I do want us to at least understand what this domain thing is about, because I think that's the thing that I think most people are really curious about. It only just took us this long. All right. Let's read this. Oh, we might also talk about magic a little bit, but we'll see. So domains take many forms. Typically, the type of domain a character rules is associated with their class. Warriors are usually titled nobles who rule kingdoms. Priests tend to control clerical hierarchies and temples, and occasionally hold lands under theocratic rule. Thieves control the guilds and underworlds of their domains, where wizards' domains include all the places where they have magical influence. A ranger or druid might not govern at all, but instead rely on a network of allies and contacts. Domains are rarely made up of only one type of holding, and usually include several different elements. A character's domain includes any or all of the following. 1, any provinces that you rule. Provinces are the actual, spots on the game board, right? They are the territories on the Risk or the Axis and Allies board game, right? Provinces are like the little square, mostly kind of sort of square-shaped land control area units on the map, all right? However, inside of those provinces that you rule, you can also have holdings, all right? Holdings in your province. You might also have holdings in provinces ruled by other PCs or NPCs. And lastly, you have assets, which are roads, castles, armies, and things of that nature, all right? The term realm refers to any domain that includes at least one province. So let's be very clear about this here. We could be a thief and we are a regent, and we control a bunch of different thieves guilds throughout several different kingdoms, right? And thus we have a domain, but we do not control any provinces. We are not actually the ruler of like an area of land. We might have de facto control, right? But we don't have de jure control of that area. And so that means that our domain is not a realm. To have a realm, you actually have to control territory. You have to control the land from border to border. All right. So a province ruler is the recognized lord or political entity capable of making laws, executing justice, and performing the duties of the head of state. A domain could be entirely composed of guilds, temples, or sources. Sources means magical sources. It's still a domain, but it's not a realm. All right. So players should select a domain for their regent characters. The Ruins of Empire book, that's the third book that we're not going to go to, provides a directory of all the domains available in Onweir. So again, remember, the continent is called Cerilia, okay? And it's very large, but the game sort of focuses in on just the one southern part of the game, and they give us a separate map for just that. So this is the map of Onweir. And these are all these little dotted lines are all the different provinces. And the third book gives detailed information about every single one of these provinces, about Hildon and Soutmoor and Loreleth and Altorane and Triward and Tornillion. And in the game, these provinces are controlled by some NPC. But if your PC is going to start the game controlling that, then you throw away that NPC for that particular thing, and your character becomes the controller for that. All right. So, the player character as the new regent gains all the assets of the selected domain, as well as all the liabilities, such as NPC holdings within its borders. Ignore information about the ruler of the domain. You are now the ruler of the domain. All right. Alternatively, if you want to go way deeper than anyone should ever go, the back of the book in Appendix 1, there is domain design guide. So you can make up your own domain and sort of create your own if you don't want to use one of the ones that is already in the book. All right. So provinces. We were just looking at provinces. These are your township or your county. These are what you control. These are the land-based areas. And they have a level, which tells you how civilized it is. A level 0 province is entirely wild, settled, only a few handful of farmsteads and villages, all the way up to level 6. They are settled farmland. I'm sorry, I think it goes to 7, actually. 7, yes. Level 7 or greater provinces are densely settled with highly developed industries and major cities with populations as high as 100,000 people. So again, going back to our map, we can see that these numbers show the first number shows us how densely populated these different provinces are. The second number, remember, is its magical strength. All right. Oh, Jesus. All right, there we go. So inside of a province or throughout, you might have holdings. Holdings are basically like forces or buildings. You can have guild holdings, law holdings, sources, which are magical holdings, and temples. Okay. You can only have as many as the province is. So if a province is level 3, you can have up to 3 holdings inside of it. Okay. And a holding is now you don't necessarily have to, it says here, you don't have to describe every single holding that you have. It's enough to say, I have 2 temple holdings in this province. But if you wanted to, you could go, you could go deep and you could describe each of those temples and what those temples bring and how those temples are designed and who's ruling that temple. Okay. So you have temples, you have guilds, you have law holdings, tend to be entities ranging from marauding vigilantes to the king's royal guard that affect your ability to control a province and the loyalty of your servants. Sources are magical sources and represent the magical power innate to that province. And temples are monasteries, shrines, temples, and cathedrals of faith. Assets are anything that isn't listed above. The regent controls the expenditure of money, the building of castles, and the movement of armies. Assets don't contribute to your regency, right? Like to your power, but the success of your domain depends on your assets. And there are 8 types of assets: armies, courts, fortifications, ley lines, lieutenants, roads, trade routes, and treasures. So these are all the things that you're going to basically use your regency points that you accumulate on domain turns, and you can use them to acquire new assets. Like you could raise an army, right? And then you could maybe go to war with somebody, or you could build a fortification, building castles or cathedrals. You could create a court, which will affect your ability to use diplomacy. You could create ley lines, which will allow you to connect your realm's magical energies together so that if you're a wizard, you can cast more powerful spells that affect the entire realm. Lieutenants are sort of like trusted advisors and loyal henchmen. Roads, well, roads support overland trade and help it make you move faster through your realm. So all of these things, trade routes and et cetera, all matter. All right. And here's just an example of a sample domain here from they give you an example of the book. So it's kind of complicated. It's kind of built up. Now, each turn, domain turn, you gain regency. All right. And these are points that you can spend to take actions throughout the course of the game. All right. We're not going to get too much into this, but a domain turn. So let's dig into this. All right. During a domain turn, so here we go. A single domain turn lasts for 3 months or 1 season of game time. 4 domain turns make up a year. During a domain turn, a regent directs his domain's growth in several ways: by working to increase the ratings of your provinces and holdings, to engage in diplomatic or mercantile ventures, to wage war, to raise fortresses, apply yourself to the affairs of your domain. In addition to the actions a regent may plan to take, random events may force them to respond to the actions of other regents, monstrous incursions, or natural disasters.
Duncan DT tipped $3. Great system for doing Highlander. Thank you for introducing it.
Well, thank you, Duncan, for the tip. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Yes, Highlander is back, and they're definitely inspired by that. Thank you so much for that tip. That's awesome. So basically, on the domain turn, you run a realm. It's, you stop playing D&D and you start playing like diplomacy risk, right? When is this done? The AD&D game is based on adventures, not public administration. Domain terms serve as a backdrop for adventurers in Cerilia and as a measuring standard of a character's success as a ruler. Domain turns are tools for creating exciting adventures and challenges for the PCs. Domain turns are conducted as the players and the DM see fit. Generally, 2 or 3 short adventures or 1 longer quest should take place between domain turns. But if the player characters are content to skip adventuring for a while, there's no reason why you couldn't play 2 or even 3 domain turns back to back to back. In any case, the DM and players decide when and how to conduct the play of their campaign. When an adventure is introduced, the domain turn is temporarily suspended. If a PC regent rides out to adventure against gnoll bandits on their border, it's easiest to freeze the domain turn until the adventure reaches its conclusion. The process of resolving a domain turn takes place outside of adventuring time. Playing a domain turn generally doesn't force the PCs to drop what they're doing and return to their capital city. But if you were imprisoned and in an enemy's dungeon, you would likely have to miss some turns. So you don't have to be like directly in your capital, but you kind of have to be somewhat in in communication. The center of action. I'm reading these verbatim because I think this is kind of giving us a real sense for how this game would all play out. If your player characters are scattered widely across Cerilia, so already we're seeing something weird here. This idea that the PCs may not be this like homogenous group like we're used to thinking of them, all right? So if the PCs are all over the continent, consider running the domain turn for only a few domains at a time. In other words, if 6 player character regents are in your campaign, you may want to play a domain turn for 2 or 3 of them at one time instead of all 6, just because it takes time. It's nearly impossible to play out the actions of every regent in Cerilia. Because remember, the PCs are just a couple of them. Technically, all these other realms are ruled by regents. How's that for between game prep? Instead, narrow the focus by choosing one center of action at a time. The PC regents in one particular center of action and any major NPCs would be considered active for that turn. The other PCs are temporarily on hold, but will take their domain turn when you finish with the center of action. A campaign might have several centers of action, or it may only have one. If all the PCs are in a single kingdom, obviously you only need one. But you could imagine a campaign, right, where you're like, one part of your campaign is the war on the Western Front against the Gnoll incursion. And like that's one area that you focus on. And then maybe you play that for like a month or two. And then, you do a domain turn or 2. And then we go, okay, but at the same time that was happening, over here in the north against the abominations, this is this other area that we've been focused on. And maybe those are different PCs. Maybe you have different sets of groups. It starts to kind of feel a little bit like Ars Magica, right? Where your character, you might have several PCs in this campaign, right? I do think depending on how, aggressive you want to get, yeah, I could see this character, where PC regents end up, going head to head and having come into blows. So I think that's really interesting stuff. So real quick, we're not going to go through all of this, but what do you do on a domain turn? You roll for random events. Remember, domain turn is 3 months. You roll for random events first, see if anything happens. Then you determine domain initiative, who gets to go first. Then you collect your regency points. Your regency points depend on the strength of your realm. The more strong your realm, the more RP you get. And RP is like money that you pay out to do stuff. Then you collect taxes and trade to get money. The realms use a currency called the gold bar. It's like a mega gold coin, right? Then you pay any costs that you require for your maintenance, like your armies. Then we get into your actions. You get 3 actions. Remember, each action represents about a month. So you take a domain action, then you make any war moves, you fight any battles, and then you either occupy the place that you fought or you retreat. And then you do the second action round and you repeat A, B, C, D again. And then you do the third A, B, C, D again. And note, B, C, and D have asterisks because obviously if you're not marching your armies, if you're not fighting battles, you're not retreating, you don't have to do them. So oftentimes it's going to be take a domain action, go around an initiative, you take a domain action, you take a domain action, you take a domain action. Okay. And then you take a domain action, you take a domain action, you take a domain action. Okay. You take a domain action, you take a domain, you take a domain, and then we're done. All right. Then at the end, you adjust the loyalty of your realm and the regency score of your realm. Hopefully you've increased the regency of your realm because you've been a wise ruler and you have done great things to bring strength to your realm. But maybe you got your, shit pushed in and got your ass kicked and your regency score is down. Now, again, I'm not going to go through every single thing here, but, there are random events that can happen, blood challenge, an assassination, a feud, a festival, intrigue, a magical event, unrest, rebellion, right? So each season has sort of potentially a unique opportunity or a unique challenge. All right. Then you collect your regency depending on what you have available to you. For example, if you are a priest, you collect regency from law holdings that you have, temple holdings that you have, and everybody collects them from provinces, actual land that you control. If you're a thief, you want them from guild and law and provinces and trade routes. If you're a paladin, you only want them from provinces and temples, right? So on and so forth. And this determines how many points that you get, how much realm currency you have to spend. Then we do some financial accounting, not space mortgages, fantasy feudal mortgages, but you get gold bars, GBs, based off of taxation. I'm not going to get into that, but needless to say, there's a table. All right. So remember how each province has a rating, right? The higher the province rating, the more civilized, the more lands, the more people are in it. And then basically you can set the taxes at light, moderate, or severe. And that determines how much, gold bars they generate. All right. You can also collect from your guilds and temples. They can also generate money, right? People donating to the temples, your guilds making money. Maybe they're thieves guild. They're just robbing people blind. All right. Anyways, that's going to give you all your money. Then you got to pay for all your shit. If you got a ton of army, if you've ever played a total war game, you know that all your buildings cost money, all your lieutenants cost money, all your armies cost a shitload of money, all right? And you also have to keep your stuff up to date. All the castles that you've built, all the provinces that you're occupying, those cost gold bars as well. So you got to keep the money flowing, right? And you can see if the number of provinces and holdings that we control is, let's say, 30, then we need 5 gold bars a turn just to maintain our domain. Okay? Pretty crazy. In fact, we also have to spend money for our court. For example, how blinged out is our court? If we only spend 0, we don't even have a court at all. We can't even do diplomacy actions because we don't even have a place to think. If we have 1 gold, it's like we're at an inn. We're just like doing a town hall meeting, all right? Or we could spend 9 gold bars and have I like that there's a misprint here. I think these are supposed to be GBs. If we have 9 GBs, then we have an opulent center of power. The envy of nearby kingdoms, art, literature, and sport are celebrated. Guests are waited on hand and foot. Every day, a new festivity. Add +3 to diplomacy. All right. And then we get into our actions and we do what we're going to do what our actions are doing, and then we adjust our loyalty at the end of the round. So what do we do on our turns? Well, we saw this table with the GM screen, but we're not going to go into all of them, but we can kind of see the things that we can use. Remember, we get 3 actions per domain turn. Well, the first one is adventure. It takes one of your actions because you go out and adventure. Again, it doesn't cost anything. And it may not bring anything. Success varies because you actually have to go play AD&D at that point. But it does take up one of your domain turns. So basically, right, a domain turn is a month, right? A domain turn is a season, and each action represents 1 month. So if you want to go adventure, that takes up one of your actions because you can't run your kingdom. You're off exploring some ancient dungeon, or you're off fighting the Bandit Lord King, right? Which is kind of cool. But the other things that you can do if you aren't off adventuring are things like agitate. You can increase or decrease a province's loyalty. All right. So you might agitate a nearby province of an enemy to degrade their loyalty. We can build roads and bridges. We can contest for holding a province, right? We can basically challenge someone for control of a guild, of a temple, of a wizard's source of power. We can create a new holding. We can build a temple. We can build a new guild. We can build a new source of law. We can declare war. We can issue a decree. We can commit diplomacy. We can disband an army. We can espionage. We can conduct finances. We can forge ley lines across the magical sources in our realm. More of a wizard thing. We can fortify, creating or building castles. We can grant, giving titles, patronage, and various effects and costs. We can invest our bloodline power into another person. Probably not something we want to do unless we're ending our campaign. We can create a new lieutenant who can kind of act as our proxy and act as our intermediary. We can move troops, muster armies, ply trade, cast a realm spell, which a priest or wizard can do to cast a spell that affects their entire realm. We can research, we can rule, we can trade, root, or we can train. All right. Notice, by the way, training is character trains for level advancement, improves proficiency scores, or gains 1 hit point. Pretty cool. And then, of course, there's a ton of paragraphs that describe each of these actions in great and existing detail, which we're not going to go through. But you get the idea. I mean, this is like a fully functional sub-game in the core of the game itself. Lord Dragon says, could we just play domain turns until adventuring is necessary? Lord Dragon, yeah, I think we could. I mean, I think the only downside, Lord Dragon, is that, remember, this is D&D, AD&D. Characters do not gain experience from doing this shit. So, you might be limited by the fact that your character is low level and you're thus perceived as being weak. So as weird as it is, because, it's like, what is experience and what is adventuring? The fact is like a good ruler in this campaign world is also going to probably be a higher level character. And it behooves you to be higher level. And so there's kind of a weird necessity to going out and adventuring. That being said, I mean, I could imagine easily playing with a group of people who might be like, yeah, I don't really care about adventuring. I just kind of want to just do these downtime turn things. So I could totally see that being a point. So when I say Crusader Kings is the closest thing a computer can do to emulate how an actual RPG plays, I was really talking about Birthright. Yes, absolutely. So let's take a look here. Let's go down to, let's take a look at training. Training. All right. A character can spend an action honing their skills. He may train for level advancement, improve non-weapon proficiencies, or learn a proficiency, or exercise to increase hit point score. Training for levels. If the optional rules for training to gain new levels, and if you know AD&D 2nd edition or 1st edition, you know what this means. It means that once you got enough experience points to level, you didn't even automatically level. You still had to spend gold and time training to gain that level. The experience points allowed you to train. The experience points didn't give you the level. The experience points let you train. So in this situation, it's not like training is going to level you up. You have to have already earned the experience points. In addition, though, we could improve our non-weapon proficiency, or we could work out, exercise, and train to add 1 to our hit point score. We cannot exceed the number we would reach with maximum rolls for our class and level. So essentially, no matter how much we train and gain hit points, we can never have more hit points than we could possibly have had if we had only rolled maximum on each of our hit dice rolls for every level. But that's still pretty cool, especially back then. Like the idea that you could just gain a hit point was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And again, there's a bunch of stuff in here. And then there's a whole section here on armies. And I'm not going to get into it, but armies have movements, costs to muster them, right? That's gold bars. So that's how many gold bars it takes to form the unit. And then the maintenance cost is how many gold bars per domain turn that unit takes to keep upkeep. All right. So, if you want to put together a unit of knights, it's going to take you 6 gold bars just to farm the unit. And then it's going to take you 2 gold bars for every single domain turn. Okay. And you'll also notice that it says L4. So that means that in order to have knights, we need to have at least 4 ranks of law holding in our group. We can't form knights if we don't have the right infrastructure and the right orders. So this is where we get into the war cards that we were talking before. All this information about declaring war, making moves across terrain. I mean, here, this is example of a war move. Look at this. Does that look like D&D? Right? No, this looks like you're playing some, high level, old school strategy game. Right. But the idea is that, you have these units of armies and you're ordering them to move into areas. They can occupy and conquest, other provinces. They can pillage. They can occupy. If you've ever played Total War, like Total War Rome, Total War Warhammer, Total War Medieval, I mean, it's basically that, but happening analog and happening at D&D turn. And then that's the war movement on the map so that you can move your units and your armies around the map. But then once those units get engaged with an enemy unit, then we go to the war card. All right. And that's what we were showing before. These things. So basically they're 3x5 index cards. And this has all the information about this unit. This is a warband of Markazor. Right. And we can see that it has a melee value, a charge value, a missile value, a defense value, some symbols for morale. But what about if we have Knights of Khorasian? Well, look at there. They got a charge value of 7. These things look badass. I want these things. All right. So pretty complicated stuff. Now it's not Warhammer. It's not a full war game, but it's getting there. It's pretty detailed. So this is basically a battlefield is set up like this. There are 3 rows of 5 spaces. And then in the back, you have your reserves. And on the other side is the enemy's reserves. Okay. And you have the center, left, far left flank. And you're basically going to deploy those cards into these positions on the battlefield. And you're going to move them into these other spaces on the battlefield, kind of like a really simple game of checkers or chess. Except you're going to use those number values on those cards to determine if those units overcome them or not. Complicated? Yeah. Highly simulationist? You bet. But it's AD&D 2nd edition, 1995. I wouldn't have expected anything else. PBTA was just a glimmer in Vincent and McBaker's eye. So we are still in the realm of just rules for everything, highly detailed, simulationist. So after moving our armies around, now we can play this full separate fucking war game. How about that? How about that for you thought it was bad, having 5 enemies in a Pathfinder 2 combat. Now we got to go through a whole fucking war game just to resolve somebody's move. Yeah. Anyways, a bunch of rules about battling and fighting and just all sorts of stuff. And then what about our Birthright campaign? Well, we got information about the gods. Remember, our priests can have different gods. So these are the priests. Remember, all the gods died, but then when they blew up, the people that were closest to the gods became gods themselves. So we've got some new gods that your characters can worship. Avani, goddess of the sun and the lady of reason. Nice. Laramie, the goddess of fire, beauty, and art. Laramie. Moradin for the dwarves represent. Lastly, magic. As I said before, the more natural, the more primitive, the more remote that a terrain is, the more magical potential it holds. You can see here that high mountains or ancient forests have a maximum magic potential of 9, whereas plains and hills have a maximum potential of 5. For each point of province, of civilization that province has, the magic potential gets reduced by 1. So, for example, if we are in the plains, which has a potential of 5, and we have civilization rating of 4, then the magic rating, if we have a province rating of 4 in the plains, the magic rating would be 1 because the potential is 5. On the other hand, if we had a forest that was highly, for some odd reason, highly developed and had a ton of cities and people living in it, and even though the potential is 7, if for some odd reason we had 7 province value there, the magic value would be 0. But that's probably not going to be the case. The forest might only have a province value of 1 or 2, which means its magical potential would be 6 or 5. Okay? Note, elven provinces are an exception to the rule. Since elves live in harmony with nature, their presence does not reduce magical potential. They are integrated. They are one with nature. All right. So what do these things do? Well, they let wizards cast realm spells. And this literally takes a month to cast, and it requires your character to have access to like world map campaign magic sources that they can tap into. And they either have to control that province or they have to have constructed magical ley lines to draw the energy to them so that they can cast the spell. So, for example, one of the spells that you can get is alchemy. A mage can create wealth by spending regency points. That's the currency that you get for just ruling a realm, by transforming worthless substances into valuables. For every 4 regency points the mage spends, they generate 1 gold bar of wealth. The effect is instantaneous at the conclusion of the spell. Alchemy can only be cast once per domain turn. The materials and components for this spell itself cost 1 gold bar. But in order to do this, we have to have a source strength of at least 3, and we have to be at least level 1. But what about summoning a legion of the dead? What about mass destruction, slaying hundreds of enemies with raining down fire, lightning, energy, or poison? What about consuming someone's castle or fortification into dust? What about summoning an army of demons to our will? What about transporting entire armies across the realm in the blink of an eye? Powerful shit. That's the wizard stuff. Priests rely on the temples, the faith that you have cultivated within your realm. You can bless the realm. You can dispel magic on the entire kingdom. You can bless entire armies. Pretty sweet. Big, powerful stuff. And then we get some monsters and some evil stuff, and that thing looks nasty. And then lastly, the last thing I want to finish with here is playing a Birthright campaign. So they talk about this. They're very honest. Okay, so this is the last thing we're going to cover. Running a Birthright campaign is a serious challenge for a dungeon master. In addition to the interactions of imaginary characters, you will also need to track a dozen or more entire kingdoms. How do you determine what a particular NPC is planning? How will the shape of the world be changed by the player character's actions? Keep in mind the one DM axiom that's always true. Do what you think is best. If a player wants to try an action that hasn't been described in the rules but seems to make sense, let the player attempt it. Worry about the letter of the rules later. Plan domain turns and adventure as you deem appropriate for advancing the story. Types of campaigns. Since players aren't required to create characters who rule domains, you have great flexibility in setting up a Birthright campaign. Sit down. This is crazy because it's 1995, but they're basically saying session 0. Sit down with the players when the campaign begins and ask them how they would like the game to develop. Some options are described below. First option, maybe the simplest one, collective rule. In this campaign, all the PCs are concentrated in a single realm of overlapping domains, sharing responsibility for governing it. The PC priest might be the head of the temple in the land. The mage is the court wizard. The thief is the master of the guilds. And one or more characters control the throne, possibly sharing power. Other players may play non-regent courtiers or minor nobles in the kingdom. This is a good option for novices since it focuses on the action and allows every player to be involved in every domain turn because everybody's kind of sharing the same kingdom. You don't have to work very hard to get the players to cooperate or join forces. Anything that seriously threatens one character's domain seriously threatens everyone's. Another variation is the High King. This is a variation on collective rule. One PC holds supreme power as the High King, and the other characters swear fealty to him. And there's a whole thing about vassalage, having vassals underneath you. The kingdom is then broken up into small chunks, each under the rule of a single vassal PC who can run his or her province as they see fit. The High King might even be a figurehead NPC controlled by the GM. And the players are all sort of like that first level of dukes, all serving a High King. And maybe the High King isn't a fellow player. Maybe it's the GM. This option allows the players to concentrate their efforts in a single kingdom and keeps them in the center of action. But players might enjoy the role-playing opportunities of voluntarily playing second fiddle to the High King character while plotting to replace him. It's lonely at the top. Only one player character is a regent in this setup. All the other characters are supporting cast who act as lieutenants, bodyguards, and advisors. Since there's only one regent in the party, the other players do not have to worry about maintaining domains. This scenario has the advantage of concentrating the PCs in a single place. You could also do common heroes. In this type of campaign, nobody is a regent, and this basically runs like any other AD&D campaign, except it's set in the world of Cerilia. And then the last one, to each his throne. This is the most complicated scenario for a Birthright campaign, but it can be the most rewarding. Each player creates a regent character and their own domain. You'll need to define a center of action for adventures you wish to run. The player whose regent is most concerned with the adventure should take the lead in addressing the issue. Players who are far away from the action may create common, unblooded characters to help aid that lead character on that particular adventure. Watch out for PC rivalry in this option. They may be competing for the same resources. So, it's a pretty complicated concept. They talk a little bit more about adventuring and design, logistics. And then there's lastly the appendix where you can design your own domain instead of using one from the book. So like, for example, this is one from the book, one that we were looking at before. This is the realm of Rosone. And you can see that it has a bunch of different provinces: Abattoir, Bellum, Caracas, Dwellin, Edlin, Fairfield, Goriad. And we can see the strength, and we can also see what law resources there are, what temple resources there are, what guilds there are, what sources. Your character could start the campaign in control of this realm, the realm of Rosone. Let's find Rosone. Yeah, right there, Rosone. So we can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 provinces, from Abattoir in the south to Caracas, Goriad, Fairfield, Bellum, Edlin. So our campaign could be that we start in the realm of Rosone. Or maybe, one character is the Prince of Ilion, and another character is the High Priest of Rosone. And, that's where our campaign starts. It could be extremely complicated. Again, look at all these war cards. There's a lot of these things. Elf archers and dwarf guards, Anurian scouts, Anurian pikemen. And God knows what these things are even fucking doing. I think these are some sort of how you compare the numbers to determine who wins when units fight. Oh, here's some goblin skirmishers and goblin infantries. Not enough to just fight goblins. Now you got to fight armies of goblins. It's quite the thing. Here we go. This is the back of the box set. And again, this came out in 1995. They did release a number of supplements for it. It was, to my knowledge, pretty unsuccessful, as most mid to late 90s TSR campaign settings were. Because quite frankly, a lot of people weren't into this, and the people that were, there weren't enough of them to keep it going. So yeah, pretty awesome. If only we had powerful computers to track all this stuff back then. I will admit that if you had some sort of way that you could help automate this and process that would be pretty sweet, GM Scott. That would be pretty sweet. When you start bringing out the cards and all this, Birthright starts to look more like D&D themed chainmail. I mean, that might be another thing too, Kyle, where they wanted to get D&D has its roots in miniature wargaming, and as AD&D second edition went into the 90s, or from the 80s to the 90s, the era of Dragonlance, the games were getting away from those historical roots of basically fantasy, medieval magic wargaming, and getting more into like high adventure, and the characters are kind of following these quote unquote plots. So Birthright may have been an attempt for them to sort of go back to those roots and go back to some of those wargaming roots. Boothby loved this campaign setting. Boothby, maybe you can share in chat, and I'll happily read it out for people who might be listening. Like when did you play it? How did you play it? Where did you play it? They released several novels as well. Yeah, they released a number of source books as well too. And again, Isaiah makes a great point. To a certain extent, obviously, most campaigns don't have magically blood-empowered characters. But the idea was that this is the way D&D campaigns were supposed to go. One of the things that I often talk about is if you go back to the original the mid-'80s basic, sometimes called BECME basic, sometimes called Redbox basic. Nowadays, people really focus on BX basic, right? This one, right? This is sometimes called BX. It stands for Basic Expert. But that was released in like 82, I think. But in 84, 85, you had the red box, okay? And the red box was also called Basic, but it was basically Basic the third edition. And those were traditionally called BECMI, BECMI. And it stood for Basic, Expert, Companion, Master, Immortal. And Basic, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know this, Basic D&D went to 30th level. And the idea is that the rule sets not only expanded the game, but they weren't supposed to expand the game all the way back to the beginning. What do I mean? Basic D&D, that came in the box set, was supposed to only cover the first couple of levels of the game when your characters were very simple and basically just went into dungeons and killed things and got treasure, right? Everybody goes, oh, you mean what D&D is? No, that was only supposed to be for the first couple of levels. Because after 3 levels, right? Think about your old school D&D. Nowadays we have like, oh, well, I need 2 million gold to buy my +6 sword because the math is balanced in such a way that I need the +6 sword. Forget all that nonsense. By the time your character was level 3, you needed gold to get experience, for starters. You needed like 2,000 experience points just to get to level 2. And then you needed like 4,000 experience points more to get to level 4 or 3. So like by the time you got to level 3, your character had earned thousands of gold pieces. So any basic equipment in the game that you wanted, you basically had. You could afford a horse. You could have full plate and a really good pole arm, right? The premise, a lot of times, because if you look back at those games, you go, wait a second, if my character is just trying to get gold and treasure, shouldn't I just retire? I'm done. And you know what? Yeah, you should. Your character is wealthy beyond means, they can retire. But the idea was that once you reach that level 3 after basic, the game changed. You weren't just going into a dungeon anymore and killing the monsters there. The game changed to expert. And in expert mode, the scope of the game changed. Now your character was leading a retinue of men-at-arms or retainers. They were going on long-distance overland travels. Now it wasn't about the dungeon. It was about the hexes. It was about going into unknown places and taming ferocious monsters and maybe starting to exert some political power. Then came Companion, C, where your characters were now sort of like the heroes of the land. Maybe they weren't necessarily lords yet, but they were so powerful that they're like they might be like the leader of the free company. And they're not officially the king, but they're like such a powerful band of heroes that they can go and win wars for people. And then you got the Master, and Master was your characters are the lords and ladies of the land. And then Immortal was, okay, you've passed beyond mortal concerns, and now you've gone and ascended into the spheres of influence to sort of fight on a alignment epic level versus demons and gods. And so the idea was the idea that you would just go into dungeons, kill monsters, and get treasure, and then level up all the way to 20 was anathema to people. They said that would be fucking boring as shit. Well, I guess apparently they were wrong, because that's what everybody did. Right. And I don't know. Sometimes I think I blame video games, because when video games first came out, they couldn't do any of this shit. They could only just do the part where you explore a place and fight the monsters and get their treasure and level up. Right. I'm talking about video games from the 80s, even into the 90s, right? With your Eye of the Beholder 2, Might and Magic, Diablo. So you had this entire generation of people who only basically played these video games or maybe got introduced to the games for the video games. And what they know of as role-playing games was fighting stuff, leveling up, getting treasure. But originally, that really wasn't supposed to be the entire game. It was only supposed to be the first couple of levels. And then the game was supposed to change. And then after a while of doing that, the game changed again. And then after a while of doing that, the game changed again. And so original, if we look at BECME D&D, it wasn't one game. It was 5 games, each with a different feel and tone. Now, AD&D did something kind of similar. It wasn't as segmented because it was supposed to be for advanced players. But the idea was that at level 9, the 10, the game changed. And you went from being adventurers to being, lords and ladies. And obviously, people didn't jive with that. For a variety of reasons. I don't know. Maybe there's somebody out there who wrote who did a bunch of, maybe John Peterson figured this out. I don't know. Maybe there's a blog or book. I haven't read of his yet, but long story short, I think it was mostly a forgotten thing. And, I'll be honest with you. When I grew up playing AD&D 2nd edition in the 90s, and we never got a chance to run a Birthright campaign. And we had characters get 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, maybe even higher level. We never did domain play because I grew up playing Final Fantasy on my NES, and Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest on my NES. And those games were, you go walk around, you fight things, you kill things, you get treasure, you level up, and then you fight the big bad guy at the end, and then the game is over at the end when you're level 99 or whatever. That's what I knew RPGs to be. And so the idea, all this domain stuff never really even occurred to me. And I think that's the reason why, even though my buddy bought Birthright, we never actually played it. Even though he was much more into the political game at the time. But I wasn't. At that time, I was like, I just want to fight monsters and level up. And so Birthright, I think, was maybe an attempt to sort of say, okay, fine, let's start this from the beginning. And let's make a little bit of sense. Why is my character a king or a ruler, even though they're only level 1? Well, it's because they have this divine blood right. It's not just about your level, it's also about the power of your bloodline. And then suddenly it starts to make a little bit more sense. I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I did not really know this. I had not looked at the system in 20 plus years. I got these PDFs, bought them from Drive-Thru RPG, downloaded them, and I've been reading them for the last couple of days since I got back from Origins. And you know, I'm actually kind of impressed. This is a great example of where the world has a lot of detail, but man, that detail matters, right? The history, the nuances of the world. Sure, it's kind of fluffy bullshit, but it actually does make an impact on the way that the characters are actually mechanically being created and made. I think it's kind of really cool to see that really strong connection between the campaign. Like, for example, if you took one of these Birthright characters with a Regency score and a bloodline power tied to this god, and you put them in a different campaign setting, you'd be like, well, this is really weird. This doesn't make any sense. Whereas I could take a wizard from Forgotten Realms and put it in Greyhawk. It pretty much would be the same thing. And so there's a sense of place, a sense of belonging, you know, that I really like with this. Also, quite frankly, you know, in my high school era, I got really into, you know, games like Axis and Allies. And I used to play, there was a summer, I think like junior year of high school, there was a summer where my buddy and I, Justin, played Axis and Allies every single day. I mean, we may have missed one or two because somebody was sick or something, but we played every single day. And I got so into World War II. And actually the next year, my senior year, I got to go on a trip as part of the French and Spanish club. I got to go to Spain and France. And while we were in France, we took a trip to Normandy coast. And true story, kind of morbid, actually. I grew up in Ohio, and my parents were not wealthy. You know, they did okay. We never went like without, but we didn't have big trips. And we grew up on Lake Erie. You know, literally, my dad had a boat, like you know, a small fishing boat. My one buddy's dad had a sailboat that I used to sail on. So I grew up around the water, and so I had never been to the ocean. We never made a trip to Myrtle Beach. We never made a trip to Florida. I'd never been to the East Coast. I'd never been to the West Coast. I'd never been to the Gulf Coast. Growing up in Ohio, we had the North Coast. We had Lake Erie. So I had never been to a beach on the ocean before. So when I, as a senior in high school, flew to Europe, to Paris, we landed in the middle of Paris, which is the middle of the country. We were there for several days, maybe a week. And then we took a train to the coast, to the Normandy coast. And we went to, Vierville, and we went to, Cherbourg and all those places where the Normandy invasion had. And I was beside myself because, again, I had become a huge World War II nut. Playing so much Axis and Allies got me really interested in, stories and novels and learning about the history. And I went to Omaha Beach. And we were there at the American Cemetery, and I went down to Omaha Beach, and I'm on that stretch of lonely beach, and it was kind of a dark and cloudy day, so there wasn't any people there. And the first time I ever stepped foot in the ocean was on that beach in France, on Omaha Beach. It was one of those moments that sort of indelibly burned into my brain. I can remember it so well, and I remember. We're getting off topic here, but it was low tide, and when we went, and the Allies who invaded Normandy that day, June 6th, they landed at low tide. So I walked down to the beach, whatever, and I get there and I'm staring at the water, and I walk into it, and I turn around to walk back, and I'm basically at the water edge. And I am just looking across this stretch of beach. And, I grew up in Lake Erie. Beaches are maybe like, 20 yards, wide at most. This was, 100 plus yards, or more of beach, just to get to the embankment, just to get to the edge. And it was like one of those sobering moments where you're like, now imagine doing this with machine guns and mortars being shot at you. It was a pretty powerful day. But anyways, where did I get to this? Oh, yeah, I played a lot of Axis and Allies. So I got way more into politics and into war games and war gaming. And now I feel like this would be something that would be really, really cool. Now, ironically, like that, Derek in his 20s, but then I was 18, 19 when 3rd edition came out. You know what? Actually, I got back from that trip. The trip was spring 2000. The 3rd edition Player's Handbook came out fall 2000. And so then it was, 3rd edition was like back to the dungeon, and 3rd edition took all that domain management shit and just, Kobe, it just shot it. He just punted it. I mean, it was like, you're going all the way to 20. You're going to be fighting, you're going to be the dungeons. You're going to be fighting monsters the whole way through. Oh, you need treasure to level up? Not anymore. These monsters have CRs and you're just going to fight them. They have an EL. It's going to give you all the experience you need. 10 fights will get you a level. Do that 200 times. Boom, you're level 20. Enjoy the ride, buddy. It's just like the computer role-playing games that you played during the 90s and the 80s. And sure enough, it was. And we loved it. And all that kind of fell apart. So now the Derek that would have enjoyed it, well, the game had moved on. Now you might say, oh, so now Derek would really enjoy this now. Well, the problem is juice versus the squeeze and all that jazz. Now Derek is likes more, subtler games and more nuanced games and certainly less complicated games. This game, I'm sure, is extremely interesting, but it is undoubtedly very complicated. And depending on your group, could create all sorts of problems with, you have to really have the right group for both, any potential conflict between players, but also just like, I really think the best way that you could do it is like, assuming you want to play a campaign where everybody has their own domain, you might have several characters and you would have to kind of play against yourself sometimes, because when you're playing as, Jacopo, the loyal retainer of Scott and his domain, and you're plotting against your own domain, you have to be kind of respectful of that. Hey, thank you, GM Scott.
GM Scott tipped $25. Thanks for the deep dive into Birthright. I'd like to see more settings explored.
Yeah, we'll see what the patrons want to do. Obviously, we had some votes. Now, let me tell you something, folks. Let me tell you something. Tonight's deep dive was brought to you by a man who never owned this campaign setting and who never played in this campaign setting and who never GM'd in this campaign setting and probably only looked through the book once or twice when he was a kid and didn't pick up the PDF till a couple days ago. So hopefully I did a good job. But if we were to pick something like Eberron or Planescape or Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance, we may be here a long, long time. See, because people assume, oh, Derek, he hates lore because no, I just don't like Golarion, and I think it's bad. I think world lore is awesome when the world is awesome, and I am way too versed in many of those campaign settings. And so depending on which one, if we picked one, I could go really, really deep into the tank. This was the surface level of me, learning what I can in a couple days and trying to bring it to you and sort of, share with you some of the things that I thought was interesting in my read. But, if we want to talk about Eberron, oh boy, we could spend this whole time just talking about Sharn. We could just talk about this whole time, just talking about Karnath, which I think is so cool, or Treaty of Thronehold, or the Church of the Silver Flame, which I also think is really cool. Heyo!
GM Scott tipped $50. Eberron, you say?
Oh, well, GM Scott may have just bought himself an Eberron stream. It was second place, GM Scott. So there is that. Well, thank you for that very generous donation. Yeah, that brings us just to about $200. That's great. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I love Eberron. I love Keith Baker. I love what he did with the Eberron world. I mean, this is not an Eberron stream, but yeah, I mean, I think Eberron's great for a lot of reasons, and I would love to cover it. And Callimachus, I would cover Council of Worms for free. I think it's one of the coolest ideas that's ever been created by the entirety of TSR or any gaming company ever. Who wouldn't, like, when you want to play as a dragon, that's how you play as a dragon. Zymel, an MTG Ravnica deep dive would be perfect for you. Yeah. Well, so the thing about Ravnica is, I know Ravnica. I know Ravnica pretty well. Garama, thank you very much. I'll get to that in a second, Garama. So I wasn't playing Magic. I've stopped. Well, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped. And I'm basically stopped right now, although I draft sometimes. So I started and stopped 4 times. And one time was I stopped when Kamigawa came out, and I didn't start playing again until Return to Ravnica. So I actually missed the original Ravnica block. So my first experience with Ravnica was with Return to Ravnica when I came back to the game after a long period of break. And I loved it. I think the guilds are so awesome. Selesnya, I love Selesnya. I love Green White, but I love Selesnya. I think the guilds are so interesting. I think the guild pack, the idea of the whole world is very interesting. And I do think that the guilds provide a really great faction system. Honestly, here's what I would love to do. What would I call it? Maybe I would call, I don't know. Shit. I'm trying to think of a clever name. Also too, like little cool things like Ravnica is an what is it called? Ecumopolis, right? It's the entire plane is one city. But I think it would be really cool to play a Forged in the Dark game in Ravnica. I think the factions of Ravnica and all the stuff that's going on would be perfect for a Forged in the Dark game. And the truth of the matter is, there is no guild. Like you might say, oh, so everybody's a Dimir. No, there's no guild that is like the good guys, right? Like Azorius isn't really good. Selesnya, by the way, if you read Selesnya, there's kind of like a weird undercurrent there of kind of like culty communism kind of weird way. Like you give up all, it's like communal living. You give up all your possessions. You have to like become one with the, with Trostani and with the whatever. Like there's a kind of a dark undercurrent actually to Selesnya. But obviously is Rakdos. I mean, they're all kind of bad in their own way. Anyways, so that'd be pretty cool. Karama, $30 says, yeah, let's talk about Zendrick. Yeah, I mean, Zendrick is great. It's actually one of the books I don't own. There's a book called Secrets of Zendrick. I never owned it. I wanted to from 3rd edition. But even if we talk about leaving, right, the continent of Corvair, and we talk about going to Zendrick, like the whole idea of Zendrick is already so awesome. Like that is I guess maybe it is, I don't want to call it, what's the word that they shun exoticism, but like it's Zendrick. So it uses like really weird ideas that have never been done before. Like jungle drow. Like how cool is that? It's so cool. I think Eberron drow are way cooler than any of the drow from anywhere else. So I agree with you completely, Karama. Thank you for that very generous super chat. Definitely well earned. Yeah, exactly. It's full. Yeah, the ruins are from a giant civilization. Oh, giants. Yeah, the giants used to be this technologically, magically advanced race. They were the dominant race on the planet, right? Like they had all of the. So cool. It's so cool. Also, again, we're nerding out here. It's the end. Whatever. If you watched for Birthright, please turn off the channel. But now we're just in hangout mode. You know what? Maybe I'll even cut this off of the stream. One of my favorite things about Eberron is how the number 13 is in everything, but there's always 12 of it. And then there's like one that is like secret or missing or dangerous. And it's like they don't come out and tell you this. It's kind of hidden, right? Like in the DNA of the game. And that's just such like a little detail, and I just love it. I love it. I love it. Like there's 13 dragon marks, and there's 13 planes, and there's, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty cool. I'm a big fan. GM Scott, I bounced off of Eberron back in the day, but listening to Keith B talk about it in 2 separate seminars has piqued my interest. Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, again, I get it. Like, I'll like true talk. Smith bounced off of it hard. He didn't like it, but Smith likes his, his chainmail chain, and he likes his swords. Jumping off of an elemental sky scooter and landing on the back of a, elemental powered train in Smith's mind wasn't D&D. At least at the time when we played it. For whatever reason, I could totally understand that. I actually can totally understand that. But, it is a different animal entirely. But for me, I loved it because it felt like it did a better job of explaining why D&D is the way D&D is, and and not having to make all these constant excuses for D&D, right? Because this is us with Pathfinder, where we're like, well, aren't there like a bunch of level 20 clerics in this city? Couldn't they just cast a bunch of spells and feed all the hungry and cure all the sick and heal all the dying? Like, isn't it just like child's play for them? Isn't the cost to do that nothing? So couldn't they just do that? Yeah. But yes, thank you so much. But what MTG setting would you most like to play in as a TTRPG? Great question. Well, it's not Tarkir. I like Tarkir, but I don't like it that much. That's a tough one. It's actually a tough one. Oh, maybe I do know. Well, it's from the more recent. I actually thought about. I remember there was a time I was going to go and I was going to get all the cards and I was going to look at all art and I was going to try to make an RPG setting for Kaladesh. And I guess in a way, Kaladesh is kind of a lot like Eberron, actually. But the only other one I would be interested in, I think, would be Theros. I think Theros would be amazing. Like old Theros, like when, before, Elspeth and, Heliod, had their feud and Heliod became an asshole. Like, I'm talking about, original Theros, maybe Born of the Gods era with Xenagod and, that kind of stuff. But, that was pretty cool. The idea of Theros was really cool. But I think Kaladesh. But again, Kaladesh would probably be very similar to Eberron in that way. Let's see. RTR is what brought me back in for a while too. Orzhov for life and after. Well done. Let's see here. Let's see. My players just ingratiated themselves with Lady Ilmaro in advance of a fight against an overlord that broke its seal in Kubara. Big battle coming up in Hakatovak. Are you like in Arenal? Or not Arenal, that's the land of the elves. God, why can't I remember it? Fuck. What's the land of the Cyanic people? Of the inspired? Not Argonesson. That's where the giants are. Sarlona? Is that the name of where the inspired are from? Anyways, I got confused. Anyways, let's see here. I'm trying to remember what Kubara's shtick was. I don't think I did too much with Kubara. Yeah, I agree. Eberron was very cool for me. Hypothesis: Derek likes lore that rewards discovery. I don't know. I'd have to think about that more detail. Wait, a hidden 13? Like how PHB 2024 has 12 classes and Artificer is the missing number 13? Secret Eberron comparison confirmed? It could be. Boothby is with Smith on that one. Yeah, Smith just, I'm not saying that Smith hated Eberron. Actually, Smith's problem with Eberron, we talked about this on one stream, is that like when we played it the first time, like we were playing it like on kind of like this sort of adventure path, and like it was way too fast paced, and they didn't have time to like do the stuff that they normally would want to do in D&D because it's still D&D, so you still need time to like, buy magical items and make magical items or whatever. Could you successfully run a PF2E campaign or a gamer campaign in Eberron? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, in many ways, it would be easier because PF2E has pretty good plot armor. And that'll keep people pretty safe so that, you can keep that pulpy action feel happening. I would probably avoid the PL plus 4s, and the PL plus 3s, but yeah, I think it makes sense. Tarkir pre-plane being ruined by time travel. Well, the thing is, I didn't hate. Okay. Like, I didn't hate the Dragon Overlords that much. Like I thought it was kind of interesting. I could go off on a whole tangent here, but there's this like awesome piece of fiction when like in the post time travel Ugin restored, like Dramoka comes and is basically going to like wipe out the Abzan, and Anafenza destroys their like spirit staff, even though that's like what's super sacred to them, because she goes, but this is what we do. We survive. Anyways, it's a great story. But I do like Tarkir pre time travel bullshit. Yeah, Nyxborn's great. In fact, the new set, Modern Horizons 3, brought back some bestow creatures. And it's so I didn't realize how much I missed that the Starfield, the Nyx field frame. I love it. One's called like Glyph Elemental. Another one is called like something Phoenix. Very cool in MH3. But I love that. I love it so much. I love that thing. Helipad was Phyrexianized and killed. All right. Heliod, yes. Heliod, it's with an O. Kabara is the jungle east of Valinor, mining frontier for dragon shards. Oh, right. Is that the one with the orcs or something? It's kind of like a frontier. Yeah, it's kind of like a rough and tumble kind of land. Anyways, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, campaign settings can be very fun, and they can be very cool, and they can inspire, and they can cause people. But the biggest mistake is becoming. It's still got to be about the PCs. It's got to be about the characters. It can't be more about you just being like, the characters are just an excuse for me to get to like fanboy or fangirl over this campaign setting. And I love it so much, and I would just sit here and read it, and like the players are almost secondary or tertiary. It's all about the NPCs, and it's all about the thing. No, like the campaign itself, the DNA of it, has to be conducive to creating and telling and collaborating to build cool stories that you could do with your group. And sometimes there are campaign settings where I feel like that is tough to do. I'm going to call out Forgotten Realms as one of these. Forgotten Realms has so many fucking 40th level characters that are just flying around the fucking cosmos that you start to go like, well, what is the appeal here? Like how does this world create adventure? It's like, okay, so the world's about to be like, well, damn, why doesn't one of Mistress Chosen come in? Why doesn't one of the Seven come in? Why doesn't Elminster come in, right? Why doesn't Catterley come in? Why doesn't Drit Steward and the Companions of the Hall come in and kick its ass? So Forgotten Realms, in my personal opinion, does have that problem where, it's been so built up that it can feel kind of like pointless. And I personally sometimes feel that way about Galarian as well. Because like, spoiler alert, but last year, at the end of last year, we finished up our Abomination Vaults campaign, and the group, I don't think this is that big of a spoiler. You figure out pretty early on that the objective of the game is to destroy Belcora. And, the adventure only goes to 1 to 10. So you're only 10th level when you defeat her, assuming you beat her. But like her plan is to like destroy Absalom and, get revenge for her family being kicked out. And you're like, wait a second. So a group of level 10 characters is going to be able to destroy, in theory, this ghost. But we're supposed to believe that she's actually a threat to Absalom at all? Like, wouldn't like some random person in Absalom just happen to cast a divination someday and go like, is anybody planning anything that's going to be like problematic? And it's like, oh yeah, there's some ghost about 50 miles away. And they're like, all right, well, let me head over there this afternoon. I'll wipe out the entire dungeon with a single couple high level spells. And then I'll just get back to my, my book. Yes, that's what should happen. That's what, that's the way I look at this. And it's hard for me. I mean, it's like, oh, just ignore it. It's like, I don't know. For me, that is one of those areas where I kind of have a hard time. APs violate this all the time, and it's super lame, and I've said this before. This is the reason why I had a breakdown with Quest for the Frozen Flame, because at the end of the first adventure, when the PCs are like 3rd or 4th level, the leader, and they've been running away from the burning mammoth for weeks, trying to escape them. And then it turns out their leader has access to teleport and can teleport wherever they want and can have fireballs and can just kill everybody at will. And the whole premise was to get away from it. But when you go to the second adventure, there's burning mammoths on the other side of the secret pass that they were supposed to take, which was the whole point of the first adventure, because the villain teleported them ahead of time. Wait, what? It was probably one of the biggest rants I've ever gone on the Discord of all time. Horrible. Unconscionable. Anyways. Sorry. I'm really tired of the Forgotten Realms. Yeah, exactly. I'm running this game so I get to do cool stuff as elements to... Damn it, Derek. Yes, exactly. I'm complaining the same thing. Galarian is its best when you stay in a single nation. You have the stitching and bending at the borders and out. Yeah, I would agree with that. But then what Galarian becomes is it becomes like a multiverse rather than a single coherent world. And you lose some of that interesting dynamics. Yeah. Well, I mean, Tolkien had Drow Jesus too. I mean, Gandalf literally was a god and then given form as a man and then died. And then they just brought him back as a more powerful version of that same god or angel. So I don't know if Tolkien's the best comparison to make there. All right. Well, it's past 10 o'clock. Oh my God. But I'm back. We're back, baby. We're doing some long streams. We're going to get like hundreds of views on this. But it's all right, because you know what? Look at you all today throwing down $120. Do you know that for the typical YouTuber, okay, you would need to get close to 35,000 views on a video to make that much money? Now, I'm not going to get all that. YouTube takes a cut, whatever. But let's just say, let's just call it what it is. I don't get 35,000 views on my videos, as you probably are very well aware. But, compare that to other much larger YouTubers who, get like 15, 20, 30K views. And you're like, oh, wow, and that's really great for them. And here we are, getting 1,000, 2,000 views a video, AKA nothing. But I'm making the same amount of money as they are because of you. Because of the incredible support of people who enjoy this content. I get it. It's long. It's detailed. It's, we have a lot of tangents and inside references, and we go probably way deeper than most people would ever dream of caring to want to go. But the people who do appreciate that really appreciate that. And so, my thanks to you all, because you let me look, there's two outcomes. If we didn't have the Patreon and we didn't have this, I would have to do something like, whatever, 5e or whatever, do the clickbait shit. I wouldn't do that, which means I would have just quit. And I like getting, I've enjoyed getting to know all of you. And, this, people are talking about, we just finished Origins, and now people are the people that are going to Gen Con are planning their Gen Con. And I'm like, I don't have a hotel. I do have a badge. I think it came. I didn't go and get it yet. And I'm like, I really don't have the money to like go and get a full hotel. So I'm like, maybe I'll drive in for one day. Like I'll drive in like the night before, I'll get a hotel, like an hour outside of the city for real cheap, a motel, just something. And then I'll drive in the morning, park, hang out for a day, hit the hall, and then, 6 o'clock or whatever, get on the road and get home by 11. Just because I'm like, it's so fun getting to see people that we missed at Origins. And people like Scott, who, I just love hanging out with and stuff like that. And again, I don't think it's practical, but, the community has been such a reward for me. And it would be a shame to, to have to quit just because people hate everything that I do. Anyways, well, thank you so long way of saying thank you to Karama, Zymel, Scott, Duncan, alternate GM, Calderak, and Damien for all the support. And thank you to all of you for hanging out and supporting us with patronage, with YouTube membership adventures, or just maybe you've never given me $1, and that's okay, because if you're here, you're watching, you're communicating, you're hanging out with us in chat, you're leaving cool comments. Hopefully, we're corresponding. It's all about being entertained and getting an education as we can, and more important than all of that, thinking about it and just being aware that there's other stuff out there. So, you should set Gen Con day trip as a TIF goal. That would feel so fast. Well, maybe. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not like hard up for cash. Although I will say my son, AKA my dog, Zeus, our 10-year-old mutt, is probably going to need another TPLO surgery on his left knee, his left stifle. It's probably going to cost me like $4,000 or $5,000. So, yeah, that's going to be cool. But it's my son, and that I don't even hesitate. Any case, I'll keep you all informed about what's going on with that. I don't know what's next. I mean, we're obviously we got to do a wizard stream on our history class. Our history class. I mean, Jim Scott's not even kidding, right? Like if I wanted to get a hotel downtown at Gen Con right now, it'd be like $800 a night, like before fees, right? So you're like probably and with parking, you're probably talking $850 something. And so for 4 nights, I mean, yeah, like $3,000-$4,000. Insane. Oh, just park 90 minutes away. I'm sorry. I don't view that as being part of Gen Con. Gen Con is more than just being in the convention hall while it is open to me. There's other elements to it as well. Locanor, I'm glad you could catch the live stream as well. Casey, by the way, the Bob hype. The Bob hype got me so excited for the Dragon Bane Mega campaign. I re-upped for a year. Dude knows how to hype. As Kyle says, Bob is a pretty good hype man. Bob really is. I actually ran into Bob's wife today. I was out on lunch, and Bob and I live pretty close by. And his wife was at Target, and I was going to Target. And I was coming in, she was coming out with Bob's kids, and we stopped and we chatted in the parking lot for a few minutes, and she was asking me how the convention was and everything like that. And I said, oh, it's so good and it's so fun to get to see everybody. And I go, and Bob is he's just so good with the people, he's so excited, and he's just so happy and eager to just, share a story and share a laugh and, sign up for everything, play anything, go with everybody. And I was like, he's just so good at that. He's just so natural at that, Yes, that is true. I mean, listen, let me be clear. Glicker has tried to help me several last year, this year. He's like, hey, I know somebody, I could get you in. I was like, look, I don't want special treatment. Like, I put my name in the lottery just like everybody else. I didn't win. I didn't get a room, as many people did not. And, my options are either pay through the nose and be downtown, or pay still probably a lot and be 30, 40 minutes out and have to Uber or have to drive and park and have none of the convenience of having a nearby room. And for any of you who are just at Origins, I mean, I know I'm talking to the choir here, but for any of you who are just at Origins with me and you stayed at the Hyatt or the Hilton or the Red Roof, ask yourself how much better your day was when you could just pop back to your room, drop off your purchases, when you could take a quick nap, when you could just go and shit in your own bathroom. For me, as a grown-ass man, that shit's important. 22-year-old Derek would have slept on a pallet, to go to Gen Con. So I get it. But I'm not 22-year-old Derek anymore. So, yeah. That is important to me. Yeah. Lord Dragon, check it out. Hey, and by the way, if you're going to pick it up and you want to do so legally, Drive-Thru RPG has the PDF. It's got all of the books from the PDF, whatever. But we have an affiliate link in our description below. If you use that affiliate link to go to DriveThruRPG, if you buy it, doesn't cost you any extra money, but we do get like 2% or whatever, 3% of the purchase price credited to our KOLC account, which I use to buy PDFs off of DriveThruRPG for all these first looks and all this other stuff. But yeah. Oh, Bob is totally the mascot of the channel, you know. And I know Smith, you know, Smith's been so busy the last 6 to 8 months because of his role at our company. You know, he senior partner, senior investment, co-owner, senior vice president. So he's been way, way, way busy because we've been going through, we got bought, we got sold, we got a new company structure. And so I know that he loves being part of this. And even though he hasn't been as available, you know, Bob is undoubtedly, and, you know, and even me, I'm here all the time, but Bob is undoubtedly the mascot. You know, Smith's a mascot in his own way. Bob is the mascot by public appearances. Smith is like, do you ever see Key and Peele? Okay. And Obama has his anger translator, Luther, the anger translator. Smith, in some ways, is like, he's like my anger translator for RPGs. Or maybe he's the devil on my shoulder and Bob's the angel. Or maybe, but sometimes I think it's reversed too. You know, I actually think Smith's the angel and he's like telling me stuff that makes sense. And Bob is just like, you know, just going on nonsense about like, let's fucking go, hype, let's launch tomorrow. And I'm like, Bob, we haven't decided anything for this Dragonbane campaign. This is like weeks ago. And he's like, it doesn't matter. The hype is real. The hype will carry us through. It's like, you gotta be worried about that sometimes, you know? Oh, we got a tip coming in from Borgie.
Borgie tipped $7.53. He's something for Dark Sun and Badass 3 Cream. Thanks for all the GM wisdom, Derek.
Thank you, Borgie. And I gotta say, I love Dark Sun. And I will be honest with you. Dark Sun, I was aware of it in 3rd edition. I saw it at the campaign setting and stuff like that. And I never picked it up. You know, it was a little too edgy for me. But I did really get into Dark Sun during 4th edition. And I think the 4th edition Dark Sun books, there's only like 3 or 4 of them, are like awesome. And they're so cool. And I fell in love with the idea of Athos and how unique of a take. It really changes the way that you play D&D, and that's what makes it really, really interesting. Okay. I got you, Borgie. And I just think that is, I think that stuff is so cool. Because again, I think these campaign settings should change, you know, they should meaningfully change the way that you're playing the game. You know, and I think that's what makes them so powerful. It is when you can have a different experience, not just like cosmetic paint, you know, everything's the same, but in this world, you know, elves look like this. It's like, no, when you play in Athos, it's like, oh yeah, the gods are dead. You can't play as a cleric because the gods are dead. Oh, you want to be a spellcaster? Great. You destroy the very fabric of the world's natural soul when you cast a spell. Like, that is significant. Like, that's awesome, you know? Yeah. I mean, that's a bold stance. That's playing a different game, you know? I think a good campaign setting, it feels like you're playing a different game. I think that's what's really so cool about it. All right. Well, I was supposed to end 15 minutes ago, but you guys keep being awesome and talking and chatting and tipping. So thank you to everybody. I don't know. We got July 4th coming up. So July 4th is Thursday. Probably won't be a stream on July 4th. I mean, yeah, you could be a preserver, but that comes with a cost, right? Preserving isn't as easy as being a defiler. Yeah, so Thursday is July 4th, but I'm sure we're going to get a Sunday stream in there somewhere. Because no, I just took 2 weeks off, GM Scott. I got stacked up. I got to do a cleric stream, a wizard stream. I got to do an Eberron stream, or at least another system setting stream. I still have a Call of Cthulhu game to run. I have an Eldamon rap to publish, or Eldamon theme song, not rap. Some of you may have heard a preview of that on Roll for Combat a couple weeks back, but I'm forgetting something else. Dark Sunday stream. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yes. Yes, I do have to do an Eberron stream. And I mean, presumably somewhere in here on Tuesday, I'd love to get Smith and Bob back on the stream. And we can play some EverQuest again. And eventually we want to get, our studio stuff set back up. And, we've just been so busy, especially with the con and all the other stuff going on, especially with Smith and his family, that we all the stuff is still in packed up in storage. So, and at some point, we will have, our cast and crew back. So I don't, honestly, you all know I come on here twice a week, and you call it 2.5 times a week. I usually come on, maybe 1 or 2 Sundays a month. And then I do 2 streams. Sometimes I do an extra stream too, especially if I'm on Roll for Combat or something like that. And I go live. I go for 2-3 hours, sometimes longer. And especially when I have the shows with Bob and Smith. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like I don't have enough. I feel like I have to start streaming another time a week, just because I feel like we have too much stuff to talk about. And I don't. And one of the reasons I don't do it, aside from my own sanity, is because I don't want to put that extra pressure on you all. Because I get people who actually message me and say, like, there's too much to watch, and the last thing I want to do, because it's not new videos in my YouTube home from, Professor Dungeon Master or from whatever, from Questing Beast. And it's like, it's going to take 10 minutes of your day. You can watch it while you're taking a dump. But me, if something drops, you're in for a marathon, right? And so now you're like, this is too much. I mean, I don't take it. I'm not insulted at all when so many of my patrons, people who pay me money every month, go, "Oh yeah, I'm lucky if I catch 1 or 2 live streams, or like as in the VOD, like a month." It's like, all right, well, I'm glad we're giving you value somehow. So, anyways, but lots of cool stuff coming. And we got Northern Reaches. I'm really hopeful it's going to launch next month. Smith's almost done with it, and I think some of the craziness is over. Bob and I are hard at work to get Dragon Tide launched, which is going to be our mega community Dragonbane game. And in the meantime, we have maybe 45 different community games going, some of which are ongoing campaigns, some of which are one-shots or multi-shots. Some of them are ad hoc pickup games. I'm not exactly sure what the exact number was. We did a count a little while ago, and please keep the end of the VOD just for this bit. All right. I'll keep the VOD. I'll do it, Roman. Thank you. I mean, look, you're asking me to do less work, so I will do it. Thank you. You need an editor to make some clips. We tried that. You know what? It wasn't actually that successful. The truth of the matter is, what I really need to do, is I need to commit. I've talked about this before. I need to commit to doing ideally weekly, but maybe twice a month, and doing a 5-minute Friday. And it would be a video that's scripted, like I'm here talking, and I come in there and I like say, hey, and I'm go, today we're going to talk about thing. We're going to set a timer, 5 minutes in the corner. And I'm sure, I'll probably go over sometimes, but the idea will be like, I just come in and I just like express one idea. No tangents, just some very to the point, quick. I get it. I hate doing that because I want you all to understand how everything connects, and I want how everything, works together. But the fact of the matter is, I get it. The content that we produce is very indigestible, and it's certainly unappetizing for people who aren't familiar with us. Like, if you know us, you might be willing to invest 3 hours to watch us on stream. If you don't know us, you're not going to. And if you watch us for the first 5 or 10 minutes, which is the length of most people's YouTube streams, all we're doing is just bullshitting and talking to the chat because we're just getting started. So I get that there's like a onboarding problem. And I think that, setting myself to, 5 minutes and then, probably ending up around 6 or 7, is actually something that I would do, not because I feel like that's the best way to get my message across, but because I think it's the best way for me to reach more people. And then if they enjoy that and they want to learn more, then they can maybe they'll be more willing to watch a 2-hour stream or a 3-hour stream. And maybe they'll say, oh, this is something that I find valuable. And then they'll find the rest of our catalog of stuff. I don't know. Just an idea. Right. I mean, they could also join the Patreon, which would be awesome. And then we can talk about it and we can go deep dive into it and everything like that. I feel like bad when I like give someone information and I'm like, but you don't understand every possible connotation of this and all the context. And also we haven't even talked about definitions and what is a game. And it's like, dude, I just wanted to know what feat, I should take. And it's like, I feel like that's such a cheap shot, like, I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but like there's a lot of videos that get made every week, every month by RPG content creators, and they're all 5 or 10 minutes long, 15. And, added up, it's many, 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 many hours and like nothing is being said, it's just, there's no analysis. There's no insight. It's just, it's just content for content's sake. And I want to avoid that. I won't do it unless I can figure out a way to make it at least somewhat valuable. Right. And if you want to talk more about this more, join us on the Discord. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we could do a little bit of marketing plug. Like we don't have to I don't have to be the worst businessman of all time. But yeah, yes, that's true. No, I mean, look, I'm not going to point a gun to my head and kill myself if like the 5-minute thing comes. The idea is like, I really want to not like, I know, Derek made if I make this video and it's 40 minutes long, I have failed. I won't even publish it. I'll just delete it, because did you notice Nonat is aiming to do the all spells ranked? Well, hopefully he does better than when he tried to do, didn't he try to do like all the classes? And I think he got through one and then quit, like basically quit YouTube. So hopefully, good luck to him. I can tell him it is a very, very long process. Top 10 things I can't talk about because you don't have a context or common frame of reference. God, isn't that the truth? No. I know he's back. Yeah, he's back with a vengeance. Which is good. I mean, that's good. I mean, Pathfinder 2 people deserve content. And God knows I haven't been producing it. I mean, once Core 2 comes out, I'm sure we'll talk about Pathfinder 2 some more. For sure. Yeah, somebody needs to make content for it. I don't even know who makes content for it now. Ronald? Who else? I don't even know. I don't know. Is it, what is it? Hukatantan or something like that. Isn't that his name? I can't remember his name. I don't remember his name, but he's pretty good. I don't remember. He actually like shouted me out on Reddit when like people were like shit talking a bunch of content creators. He was actually really, really nice. Yeah, I mean, ostensibly RFC. That's true, but they're I wouldn't call them anything. Thank you, Roman King Uga Tantan. I like his stuff. And he said something very nice about me on Reddit. It was pretty good. Him, Ronald, Bad Luck, Goblin Salvage. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who Goblin Salvage is. I don't know them. I was thinking of what's it called? How it's played? Is that the name of the channel? The guy who does like the rule breakdown. I think it's How It's Played, right? I don't know if he still makes videos. Yeah, I mean, he slowed down a lot. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, once you covered all the rules, right? What are you going to talk about? I mean, plus the game hasn't really come out with anything else, in a while. And that's been part of the problem. There's just not been as much to talk about. I don't know. And I said this before. I'll say it. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. There was a post on Reddit. People were shit talking the Pathfinder 2 content creators. And they were basically like, these content creators suck. Why do we not have better, why don't we have better content creators for Pathfinder 2? And, Ronald kind of came in and was like, well, just so you're clear, like none of us really make any money for this. Like it's not something that we, can make good money for it. And so I and then I was just kind of talking about this as well. And, I posted on the channel, and I said, hi, let me see. I gotta find it. What is going on? God, Reddit has really shit itself. So people were talking about like, why isn't there anybody good? Everybody sucks or whatever like that. And I found it here. So King Uga Tantan said, in reply to my, I said, Ronald was talking about how Pathfinder 2, and I said, can confirm all this. That being said, I think that there fundamentally is a difference between the D&D YouTube community and the Pathfinder 2 YouTube community. And ignore for a moment the size difference. Because per capita, you would think Pathfinder 2 should be bigger than it is on internet in a YouTube comment, given its status as number 1, number 2, number 3. Like, obviously, D&D is going to have more stuff because it's bigger. But given its size as number 2 game, you would still think Pathfinder 2 should be bigger than it is as a content creator and in the content creator space. And I said on Reddit, I think the core issue is that the people who play D&D, or at least the people who play D&D and watch YouTube videos about D&D, are searching. They're searching for answers. They're searching for advice. They're searching for homebrew. They're searching for some magical thing that will fix their game and make it perfect and make it work and make it, whatever. Make it like Critical Role. Make it like Dimension 20. And I said, I don't need to tell you all, the Reddit Pathfinder 2 community, that by and large, things like homebrew and new solutions to problems in the game aren't really that popular in the Pathfinder 2 space. In fact, some people have gotten kind of, called out for that. And I said, maybe that's rightly so, because the game, for the most part, works. It does function. At least it functions as you expect it to function. And so that means that there isn't a core systemic issue that the Pathfinder 2 content creator is trying to fix for you, nor is there an audience of thirsty, desperate, looking for a miracle cure which will finally fix my campaign. And so because of that, it's not an issue of just supply, it's an issue of the demand as well. And to that response, King Uga Tantan said, what a bingo comment. Relevant addendum. The Knights of Last Call might be the high production, PF2 centric, but not exclusively content that all of you are asking for. And I said, heart to him, because that was very nice for him to say. But yeah, there are a lot of people like, oh, I want to see a bunch of stuff with really high production quality content, but nobody knows who we are because we don't make that stuff. The math is tight, Tim. Very tight. The way I like it. Yeah, there's no money in PF2, I'm waiting for the L5R content creators. We do need more L5R. There is an L5R lore content creator. I forgot his name. Are you thinking like Dead Unicorn? Is that who it is? There's that one guy who there was that one guy who did like a crazy amount of work with he was like taking the stories that were produced with the card game and like converting them into thing. But that was like crazy amount of work. I can't even imagine that. Yes, exactly. AKA the Matt Merther effect. All right. Thanks everybody. We'll be around, next week. We'll definitely, be on Tuesday. I don't know if it'll be with Bob and Smith, but it might just be with me. And then Thursday, will be July 4th. So, if you're in the United States, hopefully you, celebrate our independence, safely, and we're having a lot of fun. And if you're in the UK, hopefully you spend your July 4th, voting in a functional government. So good luck to all of us. We'll see you. We'll see you on the Patreon. We'll see you on the Discord. Come hang out with us if you're not already. But yeah, we'll be back. We got more stream goals to meet. We got more systems to talk about. God help me. I'm going to read this Pendragon book. Then we're going to be talking about Pendragon. We got Dragon Tide starting. Got a lot to talk about. So we look forward to seeing you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody.